Chapter 111. I was super excited as we reached the Pokemon school. There he is. I called out to Papa, who was walking normally, and not speeding up despite us almost being there. It was such an adult thing. I'm coming, calm down, Vicky. Papa called out and I scoffed. We were almost there. Professor. I called out, racing slightly ahead, and he waved himself high above his head. Alola. Alola. I repeated as I raced up to him. I have my Papa, and Lucario. Papa wanted to come along, and Lucario is his Pokemon now. Wait, really? Heh. Lucario and him had a strong bond that grew super quick. It was inevitable. I sighed while shrugging. Interesting. He muttered but smiled at Papa as he finally arrived. Alola. It's nice to meet you. I'm Professor Kukui. Victor Ferrous. Alola. Nice to meet you. Vicky's offer to help with some training was too tempting to not accept. Those baby doll eyes of hers are pretty strong, Kukui said cheerfully, and I pouted at him for saying that. Papa just smiled. Yeah, she does that. This is Lucario. Lou. I remember. I saw you fight in the conference. You were amazing. Kukui offered, and Lucario looked a little embarrassed. But I think I've got your #1 fan right here. It's partly why I accepted today. He admitted and then released. Lou. Lucario. Lucario. The Lucario nearly jolted as he seemed to recognize my Lucario. Oh my Arceus. So many Lucario. Another Lucario. Papa gasped as I couldn't even speak. My jaw was so dropped. Haha. This is my partner. How about we call him Louie? That okay? Kukui asked, but his Lucario was staring and then took a few steps closer and dropped to a knee. Lou. Lucario, Lou. I blinked and then my Pokeball popped. Riolu hit the ground and held. Ryu. She shouted as she leapt for a drop kick, only to end up with her paw grabbed and then twisted, throwing her up and over the half-kneeling Louie. And Riolu went spiraling past, only barely managing to fall into a roll to keep from eating shit. Lou? Kukui's Lucario muttered in shock. That had definitely been an instinctual reaction to the sudden attack. Lulu. Lucario started giggling a bit, which had Riolu and Louie both looking at her. One in more awe than the other. Rio. Riolu Loliolu. She held, stomping her feet, and suddenly I felt. Oh, so now it's an issue when someone tries to steal your mama? I teased, and Riolu turned on me, and I could feel her aura emanate out as she growled at me. Huh. I think you have an admirer. Papa offered to Lucario and she sort of whacked his arm. Lou. Lucario. Lou. She spoke to Louie, and he slumped a bit. Oh, I think he just got turned down. Riolu looked over and perked up, looking quite pleased. I'm guessing, Professor, you chose Louie to give Riolu some training? Exactly. Kukui offered, which had Riolu jerk to look at him and then at Louie in horror. Louie here was one of my Pokemon I trained with under Hala, and he took part in my Kanto conference. Heck. We even fought your champion Lance. Papa blinked and even Lucario jerked a bit in surprise. I'm preparing to challenge Lance too. I admitted, and Kukui gave me a smile. I know. He said, and there was a fire in his eyes. He might have lost against Lance. But there was no doubt in my mind that Kukui wanted a second crack at him, or maybe he just wanted strong battles. I grinned, all teeth as our eyes met. Then sighed. Unfortunately, I just sent my other Pokemon home. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'd have to challenge you to a battle. Huh. That's a shame. He agreed, and then we both eased up, our smiles returning to more happy ones and not threats. But training is still good. So how about we get started? Louie knows a lot about how to prepare young fighting types. He'll give Riolu some one-on-one, to help her learn to fight with more than just her instincts. I nodded, and then smirked. And I'm guessing in exchange? You want Lucario to face another of your Pokemon? Huh. You got me. That crazy power in your Lucario. I want to give my own partner some training against it. Deal. How about it, Papa? You mind? Wha, me? Lucario is your Pokemon now, Papa. I reminded him and Lucario both. That means if she's fighting, then you have to be on her side. Papa blinked and met Kukui's eyes, and there was a hint of a fighting spirit in Papa's eyes. Alright, sounds fun. Rio. Riolu. Rio. There was a voice of opposition. Riolu complained, pointing at Louie, and then at her mother. So I walked over, interrupting anyone else, and looked at Riolu. It's not a matter of just power, but skill. Louie knows skills that your mother doesn't. So we're going to learn everything he knows, and still learn from your mama, and learn from every battle too. My words hit Riolu and she was pouting, blowing out her jowls a bit before nodding. Rio. Then she looked at Louie and pointed. Lou. Riolu. Lulucario. He agreed confidently, and was he trying to sound cool? He totally just glanced at Lucario. Yep, he was totally trying to be cool. Heh. If trying to impress Lucario got Riolu better training, then I'd take it. Then Kukui released. Oh my. Roar. Incineroar did just that, flames blaring as popped out of his ball and glared around, looking down on Lucario through his sheer height as the two of them looked each other up and down. I nodded as those four fell into their own little world. Oh well. Let's move a bit away and get started. I told Louie, and he nodded as he waved for Riolu to follow, even if he kept glancing back to see Lucario. Heh, that's hilarious. I watched on as Riolu and Louie battled, but Louie was going very easy, and kept an eye on the battle going on. Papa was completely out of his element. Kukui was absolutely fighting around Papa, and Incineroar was a powerful Pokemon, yet Lucario was doing her best to hold her own, and as I watched, Papa was getting better. There were hesitations in his orders, he'd flinch when he messed up, and yet, this might be one of the first real battles Papa had ever since he gave up his league. Not counting play battling with Mama or something. He was doing well. Incineroar really was a monster, but Lucario kept surprising him by just powering through his attacks and sending the poor cat flying. It was pretty funny, but I kept most of my attention on Riolu. Riolu. Block it. I roared and Riolu raised her block despite losing sight of Louie for a moment, and instead of getting clocked in the head, the kick coming up from her side simply sent her rolling back and climbing back to her feet. If Riolu was a human, then her instruction in more rigid martial arts would have been slow. But she was a Pokemon, and so the best way to learn was to just face it head on. Riolu, relying on instinct, was fighting a master, and with every swing of her fist she was taught what not to do, engraving it into her body. But Lucario wasn't just beating on her, he'd stop and show her a move that she just lost to, and then attack her, expecting her to try it then. And she was learning, adapting. Lucario was rightly proud of her daughter, even if Riolu was a little shit. Riolu had what it takes. The drive to learn, when she wasn't being a lazy little shit, but she had the talent. I just needed to polish her up, before I gave her the physicality to simply blow through it all. I glanced over and Lucario proved that point. As a wild Pokemon she knew how to fight. She knew dangerous battles, and was no pushover, but she'd never had the sort of training that made a fighting type take on the next level. Lucario had learned from fighting types that had decades of practice, and they had learned from decades more, and on. And Kukui was especially potent. He was a genius, he trained for battle despite being so easygoing. I looked back at Riolu, and smirked. Riolu regained her feet and raised her fists. Like a boxing stance, mimicking Louie's own pose, but slightly changed as she was smaller, but her fighting was being polished up. Then I looked down. My team was there watching, each of them staring at both battles. Even Jibble was staring, although she could just be zoned out or something. Either way. I looked at Jangmo. Watch them well. It's not perfect for you, but you'll fight more like them when you evolve. Jang. He nodded a single word, his red eyes locked on, only shifting to keep track of the battle. I grinned and nodded. It was my mistake as an early trainer. I thought I could do it like the games, power my Pokemon up, make them strong, and just roll everyone. But this was real life, and there was more to a battle besides just who has the strongest Pokemon. Training, experience. Centuries, millennia of battles, people learned from things that didn't work, and when everyone battled Pokemon constantly, it made sense that humanity had learned things that made a Pokemon a better battler. Surge had started it, and Zealous had taught me that, and I'd engraved my mistake into my heart. I believed in all my team, in all my Pokemon, but it was my mistakes as a trainer that had meant my original team would always struggle to learn things that other Pokemon learned from simply being beaten over and over when weak. So, there was a part of me that was training this second team so particularly to make up for that. To make them into the champions they could become, and become strong enough and skilled enough to beat my original team into the dirt. If I couldn't find the right adversaries for them to grow, I'd make them myself. Plus, I loved Pokemon, and watching them grow stronger was exciting. Yeah. Go Riolu. Kick his ass. I roared out, and then my team roared and cried out right alongside me, urging Riolu. She glanced over looking embarrassed. Hee hee. But she shook it off and refocused, and Louie. He charged in again. I kept my instructions limited, letting Riolu learn what she needed, but I still shouted out from time to time, and every time it was important to keep Riolu on her feet. That was a good battle, Papa. I said as I walked around spraying potion on the two battles. Incineroar and Lucario both were sitting huffing a bit as they were definitely tired out. Well. It was fun. Papa admitted a bit shyly, and I grinned at his response. Yeah, it was. Professor Kukui was full of energy. I wasn't expecting that speed. It was really extreme speed. It was extreme speed, Professor. I reminded him, and that only made his smile even wider. I know. Amazing. I taught Louis extreme speed after years of trial and error. Seeing it used by Lance's Dragonite inspired me. But yours was even faster. It's one of strongest moves any of my Pokemon learned. I admitted. And did you just say you taught it to your Lucario after just seeing it? You didn't get like an Arcanine to help? Huh? Oh, that would have been easier. He laughed into the sky, loudly at my question, and I just shook my head. Kukui really was a monster. I glanced at Papa, and despite everything, he also looked a little down. Did you have fun, Lucario? I asked, interrupting his quiet ruminations, and Lucario looked up from where she was resting beside Incineroar. The two of them were calmly chatting about the battle, no doubt, and she raised a fist and nodded. Lucario. She glanced at Papa and had a big doggy smile. Lucario. Huh? But we lost. Papa muttered quietly. Lucario. She waved it off, and I grinned as Papa perked up at her completely unconcerned reaction. I looked over at Riolu, who was surrounded by my team. Well, everyone but Gibble, who I'd been carrying around with me to keep her from running in some random direction looking for the ocean. But they were all chatting with her happily, and Riolu looked proud at everyone's attention. It was good. She'd more often cause trouble for the others, and they knew it, but right now everyone was enjoying each other's company. Louie, I noticed, was also taking a break, drinking some water that Kukui had passed out for everyone, and I walked over to him. Got any bruises you want checked out? I asked, and he looked at me, and then he spoke. I am fine. Thank you. I shivered, every hair on my body tingled, and I swear something just raced up my spine. That's so weird. Was that aura? I asked, patting at my cheeks to kind of calm down. Lulu. He broke into hyena laughter, belly laughing to the sky. Rather like his trainer, in fact, and Kukui noticed it. Huh? What's going on? He asked, and Louie looked over, and I could practically feel the connection between them. Is that so? You trained Lucario and Riolu and never had an aura message? Kukui asked, as he knelt down to stare at me. No. I just listen to what they're saying, like you do with any Pokemon. Is that so? He asked, and I felt like there was something he wasn't saying. What? Nothing, you just have a very open heart, to have your Pokemon so happy to communicate with you. We were literally just talking about my Pokemon not communicating with me. Lucario? Do you know how to do that? I asked, pointing, and she looked from Louie to me as I was pointing and then just tilted her head a bit. Lou? Louie spoke and then I could feel the aura flowing from his body. And Lucario blinked and then nodded. Lucario. Lou. She nodded, and then as she'd walked over she just patted me on the head. Fine. It feels weird anyways. I replied to her, and she just tittered at me. Huh. Louie was always willing to do it, but he learned it after he evolved and we went and fought some Lucario on Pony Island. He learned it then. I wonder why. Lucario. Louie spoke, and then he looked at Kukui, and there was once more that silent aura communication. That makes sense. Heh. He started chuckling and I looked between the three, and narrowed my eyes, as none of them looked like they were going to actually reveal the truth. My narrowed eyes at Kukui finally had him laugh and say something. It's something you'll learn on your own. Don't worry about it. Think of it as Lucario culture. Keep training and you'll figure it out. Pfft. Not telling the trainer stuff is dumb. But fine. Whatever. I grumbled, and turned away from the jerk group and heading over to my little ones. Settling in, I hugged Gibble who gibbed once as I squeezed her a little tight as I settled in. Rio. Rio said as I sat and I could see exactly what she wanted. Tonight we'll battle more, if you aren't too tired after Louie trains you some more. We're in a full training time now. This goes for all of you. Get ready, because we aren't stopping until we hit the top. Jang Mo. He held to the sky, and Brave was bouncing up and down in the grass, her face fierce. The rest of my team was just as solid, and I grinned. Well, while we let the old people rest up, I called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's do some more training. Ryu. Jong. Kukekuakuyu. Alright. Let's start dash. Gib. I looked down at Gibble's remark, and waited. Was she responding or just gibbing? I squeezed her tight for a moment. Okay. Someone on one time with her sounded good. Everyone. Pressure your special moves. Shoot into the lake. Remember. It's not about rapid firing, but learning how to guide your energy and compress it down. Go. My team roared and took off, all of them, even Riolu, excited after the fierce battle they watched, and then I looked at Gibble. I tilted her back and she looked up at me, suddenly. Gib. Let's work on some moves. I decided, and she looked at me for a long while. Gib. Alright, let's try the easiest move I can think of. I know you know Dragon Rage, but let's try to get something a bit more useful. I settled her on the dirt, and instantly her head turned to the splashing waves of the little artificial lake and stream that ran through the school grounds. Hold on, Gibble. Focus on me. I told her, gently turning her to look at me, and when our eyes locked I had her as she was staring. It'll start right here. I told her, pressing into her belly. That's where you gather your energy. I told her, remembering it from the Gabite and Gibble horde. Gib. Yeah, gather your energy, feel that dragon power. Then just let it stream up. Let's go with dragon breath. I called out as I sidled to the side and aimed her away from anyone. Let your energy out. Gib. That's a good first try. But I think we need. Hey Brave, can you come here? I called out, waving, and she looked away from where she was still working on compressing her dragon pulse into a sort of counter shield. She woogled over and then looked from me to Gibble. Goom? I'm trying to teach Gibble dragon's breath. I explained, and she nodded, already knowing what I was needing. Look closely, Gibble. I called out, and pointed her at Brave as she drew in the power into her core, and then opened her mouth, and purple draconic flames burst out, a mini flamethrower that scorched the ground. Gib. Just like that. See. Gather it up, and let the energy out. Goomy. Goom. Gumi. I nodded in thanks to Gumi as she was trying to help. Then Jibble sat there. I waited, she was shifting a little under my hands, she wasn't just lost in a dream, but actually doing something. Brave was getting impatient, but I reached up and pressed a finger to my lips, and she slowly relaxed and nodded quietly. Then Jibble. Gib, she decided, and I could feel her breath in, deep and long, and then, gah. She exhaled, and I could feel a bit of gathered energy release, but it was more like a sigh than a move. Goom. That was so good. I called out, ignoring Brave's flat response. You gathered your energy and managed to release it. That's step one. Jibble. You did it. I cheered, raising her up above cheering her on. Gumi. It's not about success. It's about the first step. This is training, remember? I asked her while still dancing around with Jibble in my arms, cheering her on. Gib. Yeah. Chapter 112. Ryu. Riolu shouted as she went head to head with a familiar Mach-Hop, and I grinned. Sure, she was still getting her ass kicked, especially when the Mach-Hop pulled out a funny move. Grabbing her by one of her wrists and just using it to drag her in and bludgeon her in the face. Sure, I was amused at her getting beaten up, but more importantly, she reacted quickly instead of flinching. Ducking the punches, and slamming her paw forward into Machop's wrist. Breaking free, she slipped backwards, arms up to guard her face, which kept her from taking another hit as she made space. She was learning. Louis had definitely done wonders with just one session. Unfortunately, one battle wasn't enough. One afternoon of practice wasn't enough, and more importantly, Riolu was a bit tired. Even Riolu's famed stamina didn't match up against so many battles back to back. Mach-Hop once more dived in, using a sweeping motion with his back to get in close as Riolu's fist only whiffed air before a glowing fist slammed into her, and she was done. Was that dynamic punch? Yikes, that little Mach-Hop was a real monster. Machop. He roared to the sky, and the other Pokemon that weren't battling roared for him. I hurried over, and despite the win he looked at me rather thankfully as I healed them both up. But while I healed them both up, Riolu was just staring up into the sky. Rio. Yeah, getting your ass kicked hurts. I replied to her whine, and she huffed at me, which made her flinch, so I focused on her ribs. Yep, that punch must have hurt. Riolu. I stalled for a moment, and then felt my smile stretch across my face. It was a good fight, and you'll get him soon. I said confidently, as I sprayed a bit more potion on her side. Rio? You're learning a lot. You broke his grab, didn't you? He was about to seismic toss you before you did that. Riolu. She offered, raising up her fist and looking up into the sky with it raised. Looks like Riolu was feeling that push with every loss. Good. My job was to keep the losses from breaking her spirit, because if she made it through loss after loss, it would refine her spirit into an unbreakable desire to win in every fight. That's one of the advantages I was hoping to give my baby team. Forging an unbreakable foundation for them to grow from. Well, that, and the skill to use special attacks. I waited a while for whatever Riolu was going through to end. Her fist dropped, and only then did I critique. You know, you can use Vacuum Wave. I pointed out the one move I'd pushed her to use over and over, since Aura Sphere would be her bread and butter when she evolved. She instantly puffed out her cheeks at me. Rio. Come on. I reached down and grasped her forearm, and with an easy move pulled her up and onto my back. She squirmed a bit before settling in. She didn't weigh anything really. Well, I mean compared to gravity. So it wasn't hard. I secured her but with one hand, and grabbed my potion bottle with the other. This one was getting low too. Need to stop at a shop in the morning for sure. With that I walked off, ignoring her whining in my ear about being carried, as I headed to check on everyone else. This night was going about the same as the last. Sure, my team was doing better. The fact was, as young as my team was, every battle was a drastic change to their growth, but it wasn't enough to overcome Pokemon that came out and battled, if not every night, as often as they could. Jangmo-OS Dragon Pulse kept him going, and he gritted through a few more attacks before he was knocked out. Dratini added a nice twister into his attacks, using the move to disrupt his enemy's view so a dragon pulse would plow through, an awesome combo move, but not enough as he was knocked out after his opponent recovered. I'd have to talk to him after, he seemed a bit down at his loss. And then, there was Brave. I grinned as her battle continued. The Sableye she'd battled the night before and her had singled each other out, and were going head to head. Gumi were considered the weakest dragons. That might be true, but as always even the weakest Pokemon could overcome the strongest with the right moves, or skills. And right now, Brave, despite being scratch up and dirty, was bouncing around, using her own dragon pulses to help her move around, and combining that to shield against attacks. The Sableye's power gem was blasted back by Dragon Pulse area, and at the same time as she used it to shield and move around, she was also moving into position for an attack. Brave cried out, and a Dragon Pulse control shot out. The dragon-faced beam didn't travel for the Sableye. Instead, as Brave was still in the air, it shot around her like a spiral, and the Sableye's next attack was deflected by the burning swirling dragon energy. And then Brave rode that energy down, roaring like a dragon all the way down until both the attack and Brave herself smashed into the Sableye, which hadn't moved quick enough. The explosion of the dragon pulse hitting its target covered them both in dust, and then I waited with bated breath. Then as it cleared, "Goom?" The voice was confused, like she couldn't believe it, like her victory was an impossibility in her own mind. "Yeah. You did it." I roared out, and even Riolu cried out weakly from my back. Gumi looked confused, scuffed up and dirty as she stood up on top of Sableye's chest. Then she looked down, seeing her defeated opponent, and then the cheers hit her, not just from me, but the horde of Pokemon around us. Warriors and battlers. Pokemon that even wild refused to stay weak, and wanted to grow. And Gumi? My little Brave? She looked up to the sky and roared, "Gumi!" And while she cried out, as she was cheered up, I noticed there were two that while cheering for her. Dratini and Jangmo both watched scuffed up beside me, and I could see the look in their eyes. They hadn't managed a win. They'd lost, and now they saw one of their companions, one of their friends, do what they couldn't. And even in Dratini, my happy little guy, I saw that draconic pride rising up. This was honestly better than I could have expected. Jangmo and Dratini had both seen Brave as a sort of rival to surpass, and once again she'd done what they couldn't faster. I knew teaching her counter shield first was the right call, because for both of my dragon boys their will was hardening. Their desire was growing. And this would push them even harder. I'd just have to guide them to not lose their heart, but considering we were dealing with a couple dragons that was unlikely. No, this was perfect. Ornan. I mumbled as I woke up to the sound of the TV playing. I blinked and remembered how familiar it felt. Like when I first arrived in Alola. Everyone was hanging around the room, either still napping, or slowly waking up. Jangmo and Riolu were both at the bottom of the bed curled up and watching the TV that Riolu had turned on. I checked on everyone and smiled. They were all tuckered out enough they weren't causing trouble, which instantly made them all a lot cuter. Brave was still sleeping in the bowl of water I'd placed for her, and she had a big snot bubble coming out of her face, which was actually a good thing. It means she had regained all the moisture she lost after the battle. Mimikyu was rustling around in my bag under the bed if the sound was right, and Dratini was wrapped around me, sleepily blinking his eyes at the noise of the TV. Gibble. There was no Gibble? I sat straight up, adrenaline surging. Gibble? I called out and looked around and everyone glanced at me, but no one responded except with sleepy eyes, and then I blinked. No way. I got up and clambered off the bed toward the faint noise. Coming from the bathroom. No. Oh no. No 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 no. I flicked on the lights. Gib. Oh no. Gibble gable. I whispered, just taking in what I was seeing. Gibble, sitting in the toilet happy as a dragon I guess. Her little claws splashing in the water. How long had she been in the toilet playing? Did she drink any of the water? Oh God. I took a breath. Mimikyu. Can you get me my soap from the bag? I called out, and then hesitated. And a camera. If I was going to have to clean this up, I was going to enjoy the cute baby pictures later. Only once Mimikyu scooted over, and I took a picture or two. Or 12, 'cause it was cute, if disgusting. Okay, you little grimer. Let's get you in a shower, I muttered as I stepped in. Floor's wet. I held in the sigh and just walked in, picked up Gibble much to her displeasure, and noticed she'd actually been sitting with her tail right down the drain too. Ew. Also, I hummed, as I held her, she felt a bit cold. I'd definitely have to warm her up and get her to a Pokemon Center after a good bath. I set her in the show, which got a small reaction as she shifted slowly towards the shower head. Well, at least she was getting responsive. Tossing off my clothes, I started the shower and settled in. Mimikyu ninjing around the bathroom to avoid the water. He handed me the soap. Thanks, buddy. Kukkkkku. Then, as Gibble was very distracted, I prepared to get to cleaning. A complimentary washcloth was perfect, as I grabbed the small bundle Mimikyu handed me, popping it open well away from the water. Inside was a small row of metal shakers. I twisted the top and shook. The white flakes would set up very well, and this was an antibacterial soap. Then I closed that up and grabbed the next. This was a scale polish and would help remove any stains from the scales, and reduce any irritation from the soap. Once that was put away, I grabbed a small brush that had some firmer bristles than I'd normally use, good for scales this one, and worked it into the cloth, building up suds and combining the soaps. Once I was done, I adjusted Gibble a bit out of the water, but she was happy just wiggling her feet and claws into the water, splashing. Then the scrubbing started. The brush ran over her, and only when the bubbles started flowing did she even seem to notice. Claws reaching out to touch the bubbles foaming around her, but she squeezed at them for a while before deciding it wasn't as interesting as just water. Gib. Is that so? I responded instantly as I turned her around. Gib. Gib. Uh-huh. It sounds like you had fun, I muttered. Gib. I smiled, despite the early morning. Well, it was probably late afternoon by now, but despite it all, she was growing well, so that was good. Good enough to make me let the irritation go. Once her crest was nice and polished and clean, I worked down her horns, which did distract her a bit as they were a bit more sensitive, but she actually seemed to accept the feeling once she got used to it, and was happily just lolling around with her mouth open as all the sensations washed over her. She was growing into a good girl. Now I just had to figure out a way to keep her out of the toilet. Well, at least we were having a nice moment of skinship. Do you like this? I asked her as I scrubbed, and after a while, I just heard a quiet gib in response, which honestly could mean anything, but I'll take the wins I can get here. By the time I was done, I noticed the floor had towels laid over it. Mimikyu had obviously been trying to help. So I flashed him my brightest smile. Thank you, I whispered just for him, which he practically burst with love in return. Okay. I need to take Gibble to the Pokemon Center. If you promise to be good, you can stay and watch TV, I said, and I'd Riolu up firmly, and sent me a look as she moved from TV to me. Rio. She nodded and then flopped back onto the pillow, my pillow, she'd stolen and was resting against. Yeah, I figured. Jang. Jang mo-o. I got an excited little dragon bark as well, and I smiled at him. Alright. How about you, Brave? Goom. She yawned in her bowl and slipped down deeper. Yeah, she was tuckered out after last night. Okay. Mimikyu, before I could speak, leapt up and onto my shoulder. I noticed only a moment before it happened what he was up to and giggled as he started running a comb through my hair. Hee hee hee. That tickles. You're going to help me, are you? Coo. Cuckoo. Thanks, Mimikyu. I yawned a bit but settled Gibble down and returned her so she wouldn't rush back to the bathroom, and then finished getting dressed again and headed out towards the Pokemon Center. Welcome, Nurse Joy, I called out as I rushed up to the front desk. If you have any Pokemon that need healing, place them here. Well. It's not a battle issue, I explained, and she nodded, looking serious. What's wrong? So I found my Gibble this morning, playing in the toilet. I don't know if she drank any water from it, but she was in there for a bit. Oh. If it helps, I've used a disinfecting and scale soap. Oh. That does help. Hee hee. Blissey helped me pick out the right soaps. That's A relief actually. Nurse Joy offered with a slightly tired sigh. Why don't you come along? I'll have an antibiotic for her to eat, and that should handle that, but a trainer is usually best to offer food. I can do that, I said confidently, and she guided me into the back as a Chansey took her place at the front desk. She guided me to a little back room, and I released Gibble, who blinked and then looked around before just sort of zoning out since there wasn't any water for her to get distracted with. Nurse Joy went through a cabinet and passed out a pill that, well, it was kinda large, and looked like something you'd see right out of an anime. That's a big pill. Dragon type's antibiotics have to be robust. She just needs to eat this. Can I put it in a berry? Yes. I reached into my pack and pulled out whatever berry I grabbed first, since Gibble was more than happy to stuff anything down her throat, and then walked over and offered it to her. A moment later Gibble reached out and grabbed the berry swiftly, but not as aggressively as she had done when I first met her, and stuffed it into her mouth. Then she continued to chew seemingly on her own claw. Some things never change with you, huh? She does have an interesting personality. She's kinda like that, I answered Nurse Joy, but I reached out and scratched along Gibble's fin until she was more than happy to waddle closer and curl up against me. She was cold when I got her out of the toilet, but I warmed her in a shower. That's fine. Dragons might be weak to ice types, but they're quite resistant to chills. She's healthy, so any chill she might have taken will be washed away by her own internal energy. And a bit of warm sunlight. That's good. Thanks, Nurse Joy. The woman tittered. As far as Pokemon playing with toilet water, well, this was one of the least worst situations I've dealt with. Oh no. Oh yes. Pokemon can be a bit silly. At least it's not a Grimer or a Mook. Oh no. Oh yes. We both laughed at that, and I picked Gibble up, holding her on my side, as Mimikyu giggled from my shoulder a bit too. Rio. Rio Rio. Riolu. Riolu. She chattered away, as I sat back with Professor Kukui. I'd headed to the Pokemon school once classes had been out, and he'd walked me to his home where we were now sitting on the porch, watching as my Riolu and his Lucario trained. Riolu, if I wasn't mistaken, was showing how she'd lost last night, and was asking for ways to overcome it. Louie, like a good sensei, was listening well, and then guiding Riolu on both how to overcome those moves, and then teaching her how to use them as well. Gaining even more understanding. Louie really knows his stuff. Heh. He's one of my friends, and I do take training seriously, even if I'm a professor now. You're strong. I agreed without hesitation, and Kukui smiled at my words. I do wish Alola had a bit more of a culture for battles, like your Kanto gyms. They're fun. They teach a lot, how to train Pokemon and deal with different types. Exactly. Sure, our island challenge can be great, but, he sighed, I don't think it's wrong though. I muttered as I watched our Pokemon train. It's less focused on direct battle, but that's not wrong. Why not both? If you like gyms, Professor, why not just make one? What? Just make a gym, make a badge and pass it out to the island challengers. Heck, go around and find other strong trainers around the island, and get them on board. Ha ha ha. It's amazing you came to that so quickly. Just do it, huh? It's not that simple. Why not? I asked, and Kukui, usually so exuberant and happy, was melancholy. Tradition. There are those that don't like the changes that have come to Alola. Our shift towards tourism, the change of our people with so many new cultures coming to Alola. Did you? Have you heard about the Thrifty Megamart disaster? I hesitated, before nodding. A little. Tapu. Bulu? Hey, that's right. The Megamart was built on ground important to the Tapu, and she didn't react well. That's right. Alola loves the Tapu, and we are bound by the Tapu. He said heavily. The Kahuna. They wish to grow too, but The recent losses, the fear of angering the Tapu, have caused everyone to be wary. The Kahuna are worried it would be another cause for the Tapu to react violently, so they're saying no. Exactly. But doesn't Tapu Koko like battling? The fun feast. The one that they let me take part in. Tapu Koko responded. Sure, but it's not just Tapu Koko, Anne. The Kahuna are doubling down on the island trials as the way forward. Understanding Pokemon, he leaned in. Understanding the Tapu has become more important than ever. Was all I could say. I knew Kukui would get his Alolan League eventually, but it did explain why it took him so long, and why he struggled for it. Ash coming through and doing his befriending the Tapu, and everything else, and didn't he help Hapu become the Kahuna as well? It probably settled a lot of people's fears. Ash was good about that sort of thing, but that was years in the future. Probably. Unless Ash showed up tomorrow, still 10 years old, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if it happened. But no, focus. Kukui, and Alola in general had done a lot for me. Should I interfere? Some people wouldn't react well. I wasn't Ash, I wouldn't be staying here for years, truly becoming one of them. But could I just do nothing? Come on. Don't give me such a tearful look. Making a league here in Alola, growing our battle culture? That's my dream. I'm happy to keep working on it. You'll manage it. You think so? I know so. You have the fire of your dream making you stronger, and pushing you forward. I said confidently, enjoying being able to sound like the wise master. Well, come on. I'm all fired up and could use a good battle. Pfft. You're talking to the wrong team, but I'll show you my little ones will grow to be champions. That's the spirit. Chapter 113. It was another late morning. Battle training the night before at Clawmark Hill had gone well. The struggle of going against strong Pokemon, of learning how to battle through it, of the practice they'd put into training evolving into function during battle. But even I was getting tired. So today was going to be a new rest day. At least that had been the plan. As I headed out of the hotel, I ended up walking down the main street of the city looking for a place to get some lunch for me and my team. Goo? Does it smell good? I asked Gummy, as she was riding on my shoulder, and she woogled up and down a bit, showing it did in fact smell good. Well, the little champion gets to pick lunch. I confirmed for her, and she brightened up instantly. So smug for a little gooball. It was adorable how proud she was. She continued to be the only one of my kids that had really managed a win at Clawmark Hill, besides Mimikyu. Not to say the others hadn't put on good performances. Riolu was definitely starting to shine combined with Louie's polishing of her fighting skills. But Dratini and Jangmo both weren't able to push all the way through. It didn't help that the silly boys were picking some of the stronger Pokemon on the hill when they battled, but at least they hadn't lost any of their spark yet. No, instead the losses were turning that desire into a blaze. I headed into the little shop, one that I hadn't entered before, but the smell of spices in the air definitely had my tummy rumbling, and soon I was seated in front of a window, as I got everyone comfortable. Brave of course got a plate with some of my water from the cup the server placed on the table. It's not too cold, is it? I asked her. It had been ice water after all. She bounced a bit and shook it off. Good, it seemed she actually was enjoying the coolness. With that, everyone got placed around the table. Right next to me was Gibble, so I could make sure she didn't run off to the ocean. Dratini and Jangmo shared a chair, with Dratini wrapped around his back and Jangmo sitting with his tail wagging as he sniffed the air, and Mimikyu was refusing to leave my head, so I had him sitting on my head happily, the highest on the table. Riolu had her own seat, and was bouncing on her paws, tail wagging as she kept standing up on her chair and looking at the kitchen. Food'll be here soon. Rio. She whined, and I chuffed a bit. That was definitely an I know. But she was still eager for the meal. So while we waited, after ordering, I looked over my friends. Jangmo's scales were a bit scuffed, but he wore them well. His brassy head plate was scratched, and had a big white scuff running across it from where he'd blocked an attack last night. Jangmo, after we're done eating, want to sit on the find a place to sit and polish your scales? I asked him, glancing at Gibble and relaxing. She was still zoned out, and not rushing to the ocean at my near mistake. Jang. Jang. He barked, tail wagging, and I smiled at him happily as he loved that idea. His barrel was puffing up and he looked very proud. I almost started frowning at myself a bit. Had I not given him enough attention? I hope he didn't feel that way, but between Riolu's training and Gibble in general, we hadn't really done much stuff, just the two of us. So instead I smiled and made a promise to spend more time with my little dragon. Your meal is served, called out a pretty girl as she started dropping off multiple plates of our meal. The skewers had meat and berries all grilled in a sauce, and I could see half my team start drooling at the smell. Heh. I started passing out the plates, making sure everyone had access. Then I grabbed a skewer and carefully de-skewered it onto a plate. Once the long piece of wood was pulled away and safely away, I brought the plate down and rested it on my knee next to Gibble. She noticed it slowly blinking once as she looked down from the ceiling. Or out the window. It was hard to tell exactly what she was looking at sometimes. She did have that predator vision where her eyes were very much on the other side of her head. Gib, she spoke and reached out, her little claw digging into the food before stuffing it into her face. She chewed. Gib then reached for more. Good. I looked over everyone to make sure things were good. Dratini and Jangmo were both happily chewing down. Dratini had even reached out and was holding a full skewer in his tail. That's really good dexterity, Dratini. Good job. Teeny. He chirped happily in response. Jangmo was sitting sort of back with both his paws wrapped around a skewer, and while it was fighting him a bit, he was still getting the food. Brave was happily chewing on the side of a skewer I'd placed near her. Riolu. Riolu. Rio. Riolu. She cackled, mad with power. She was double-fisting a skewer in each hand and happily biting into both of them whenever her mouth was clear. I sighed. This girl. She was making a mess of herself as well. Oh well. We'd hit the beach after this for a break. She'd get cleaned up then. Then there was Mimikyu. I made a noise as I was reaching to eat the next section, only for a ghostly hand to slip down and slide the meat chunk off and disappear it into his disguise, leaving me to bite into nothing. Huh. My food is gone, I said, playing it up, and Mimikyu giggling above me. Even Riolu was chuffing at my overacting. I got the next piece, and then once again when I went to bite it disappeared. Huh. My food is gone, I repeated, fully in the position of straight man, and this time Riolu had to stop eating. She was laughing so hard. I fought off my smile, instead keeping my face blank as I looked around. Who's there? I demanded, and Mimikyu started cackling above me as he couldn't hold it back, and then Dratini, guffawing a bit too much, dropped his skewer. Dra. He gasped in shock, and looked halfway to being upset, when I just reached out and pushed another one to him. It's okay, buddy. Accidents happen, I assured him, since he knew the floor rule. Either way, lunch was a fun time with everyone having fun and chattering away as we all ate. Looks good, huh? I asked Jangmo, having polished not just his main brassy armored head scale, but his side folds as well, and he was examining each and every one of them, seemingly enjoying seeing his own face in his scales. Jang. I smiled, satisfied, as I put away the polishing kit. When dealing with dragons, it really was a necessity. They were messy little guys when little. Once I packed away the polishing kit, he raced off, almost instantly running up to Dratini and showing off his scales. Dratini had been working with Riolu making sand castles. He'd been helping her make the tunnels through the sand, so he was 90% structurally supporting the whole castle. I of course knew this would never work for long. Dratini was a happy little guy and patient, but he would still forget, or just decide it was time to leave eventually, and Riolu's little castle would get torn apart. I just let them play though. Mama, Papa, and Lucario were all here keeping an eye on things. I looked at the three adults and smirked at how relaxed they all looked. Papa had Rockruff literally laying against him. The rock type was belly up and looked in heaven as he was curled up in the nook of Papa's arm, and both of them were passed out, I think. But there had been a little girl that was being a very good dragon today that needed a reward. I'm going surfing. Keep an eye on everyone? I asked, and Lucario nodded behind those silly sunglasses she'd picked up, as Mama glanced up from her book. Taking Riolu? Not this time, she's busy with sandcastles. I'm taking Gibble. I said, and Mama gave me a look for a bit before nodding. Be careful. I will. I grinned as I walked up to my little ball of teeth. She'd been sitting in the shallows just splashing around for a while, completely content. I'd managed to convince her not to rush out into the waves somehow, and she'd been a good girl and stayed put. So I flopped down in the sand beside her on my elbows. Hey Gibble Gable. You want to go into the ocean with me? I asked, and waited. Something I'd learned in interacting with her more, you really did need to give her some time to process. Her eye looked at me, without a reaction for a while, but eventually she pushed herself to her feet and started waddling right into the waves. Heh. Yeah, I thought so. Come on, I have something fun for us to do, okay? I picked her up, and instead of walking back out, I stuck to waves, letting her enjoy the water as I walked down the beach. The surfboard rentals were a good way up, but a slow walk with the waves splashing with my silliest girl sounded fun. You like water a whole bunch, don't you, Gibble Gable? Gib, she sort of replied, although I wasn't sure if that was in response to what I said, or just because she felt it was time to make noise. I'd often hear her randomly gib when she was doing anything. Finally I got to the rentals, and had to take Gibble out of the water for a bit, and the whole time I could tell she was just staring at the water. But finally, with a bit of fin angling, I had Gibble under one arm, and a surfboard under the other, and headed out into the waves. Heh. I feel like Lilo and Stitch right now, I mentioned as I paddled the board out, while Gibble sat at the front happily playing in the waves we swam over. Gib. Yeah. I agreed with her, whatever she was saying, or not saying. Gibble was just like that. I didn't head out for the actual surfers though. I was not confident I could hit a wave and keep Gibble on the board, so instead I swam out another way. This was the baby waves area, and the surfing was mostly just playing around. Perfect for Gibble. The first time we hit a small wave and I stood up and rode the wave back towards the beach, she actually perked up, as instead of seeing the wave wash over her, she actually got to reach out and touch the little wave as it pulled us along. Hee hee. Like that, did you? I swam back out, fighting through some waves before doing it again, and once again Gibble reached out and happily felt the wave that we rode along with. I could see how excited she was. I might have to try a real wave to see how she'd react. But before I could even get that idea started, I noticed someone approaching, and blinked. Is that a Shellos? Is that a Gibble? Was shouted back at me at the same time, and I felt like I'd just been pushed back with how much force the girl had put into her shout. Gib. I petted Gibble to calm her down. She sure is. I agreed, and then the girl blinked, realizing I had spoken, and looked at her Shellos. Yes. This is my Pinky. She's going to grow into a monster just like Cynthia's. I blinked and then nodded. Yeah, Cynthia's gastrodon is strong. Yes. Exactly. She snapped at me, and then shifted her head. Her blonde hair shifted to the side, showing off. Are those Cynthia's hairpins? Hee 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 hee. The official Cynthia branded Lucario hairpins. Only 400 were ever made. She offered, and I nodded slowly, because, branded? Ah. It's such a relief. Someone with a Pokemon I can actually recognize. I got into an argument with this Hoenn boy at the hotel. He said Steven Stone is the best champion. I've never even heard of Steven Stone. He sounds dumb. He's strong, with his Metagross, but Garchomp is better, I said, grinning down at Gibble and rubbing at her scales. Gib. Yes, exactly. Pfft. As if there is any champion in the world better than Cynthia. The girl yelled, at the top of her lungs. I just chuckled, 'cause I mean, Cynthia was just built different. It wasn't exactly planned, but there was a reason I had like half the Pokemon on her team as well. Milotic, Lucario, Garchomp. Cynthia built herself a team that was frankly scary. Not like all flying type Lance. Heh, but a Gibble. Wow. I didn't think I'd even see one. How did you get permission to bring it along? Oh, it wasn't any trouble really. Not like my bigger Pokemon. I explained and she looked impressed. Wow, your family must be important to be allowed to take a Gible out of Sinnoh. You can find Gible in other places besides Sinnoh. Garchomp can fly, you know. Pfft. No way. Everyone knows that only Sinnoh has the proper atmosphere for Garchomp. She offered with all the confidence of someone that had no idea what they were saying. But ugh, you're so lucky. How'd you do it? I've wanted a Gible for forever. I really wanted to try and find one as my partner, like Cynthia. Oh well. I was exploring and stumbled into a nest. Oh no. Hee hee. I laughed at her honest horror, waving her down. It was okay, my team is really strong. I fought Gible's mother, who was a really big Garchomp, totally the alpha of the whole mountain. Whoa, and you won? Yep. My team is the strongest. But then I got permission by the matriarch to take a Gible. I offered to raise one of her children to be just as strong as the rest of my team, and out of all the Gibles, I chose this one. Wow. Was she the strongest? Nope. She was the smallest. She was being bullied a whole lot by the rest, for being small, and so I chose her. I explained, gently stroking Gible's fin, which she was quite happy to let happen as she played with her claws in the water. Huh. You picked the weakest one? I picked the one that I could help the most, and the one that was perfect for me. I don't know. I think I'd have picked the biggest one. Don't you want strong Pokemon? Pokemon are strong or not based on their trainer. Not on how big they are, or something. Gible will someday be the strongest Garchomp in the whole world. And probably spend all her time playing in the water. She likes it. Second strongest, maybe. The girl offered and I looked up. Cynthia's partner is the strongest. The unbeatable Garchomp. I just laughed at the girl's exuberance. You really like Cynthia, huh? You're looking at Cynthia's future apprentice. Whoa. Really? Well. I will be someday. She argued and I calmed down from the surprise before nodding. Fair enough. I wasn't dealing with someone actually working with Cynthia, but just a Cynthia fangirl. Good luck. You'll need to be strong though. I know. She agreed, shooting a fist into the sky. I'll be a strong trainer. I'll get all the gym badges on my journey and beat the conference. I'll face Cynthia. She roared to the heavens and I couldn't help but giggle at just how exuberant she was. I wish you luck on your goal. Just keep trying and you'll make it there. Humph. I will. Without a doubt. What about you, are you excited for your journey? I've already done it. This is my vacation after the conference and stuff. Wha? You're 12. Nope. I'm 11. She looked at me in shock for a moment. You can't start your journey until you're 12. Oh, it starts at 10 in Kanto. Wha, Kanto? What even is that? The Kanto region? It's where I'm from. I explained and the girl continued to look like her brain was fried. But you have a Gible. Yep. I went exploring in the wilds north of Kanto and found her nest. But. That's a Sinnoh-only Pokemon. They're mostly found in Sinnoh, but I did say you can find them outside of Sinnoh. No way. Everyone knows they only live in Sinnoh. Are you a Pokean thief? Don't be rude. I snapped back, holding Gible a little closer. I'm not a thief. That's mean. But, she shook her head. I have to tell Papa about this. He's part of the Sinnoh League. He'll do something. She said, sounding rather frazzled. So I just shrugged. Okay. I'm gonna keep playing with Gible Gable, and then I'll be on the beach. I offered to her and she seemed to take my lax reaction to heart and seemed to puff up. Then she started paddling away. Come on Gible, let's hit another wave. Gib. I warned you, Riolu. I called out as I walked out of the waters and onto the beach. Riolu was pouting in the remains of her sand castle where Dratini had obviously got fed up acting as her support and slithered out. Rio. I just shook my head and headed over to Mama. Papa was gone along with Lucario, I noticed. Welcome back. How were the waves? Great. Jibble really likes surfing, and she didn't mind when I tried a bigger wave and lost control. I think she actually giggled when she went splashing into the water. Well, that sounds positive. Mama offered, smiling at me, and waving me over, so I plopped into the sand beside her. Where's Papa, and Lucario? Getting some food. Not all of us slept in until noon and then had lunch. Hee hee. I rubbed the back of my head as Mama was giving me the look. You know this is a vacation. I understand you want to train your Pokemon, but you're supposed to be having fun. It is fun. But not at midnight. I know you've been staying out late. Yeah, Mama gave me a look. Try not to stay out so late. I know you want to battle with your friends, but... Well, you're not on your journey right now. So I'm gonna start putting in a bedtime if I have to. You. Mama, please no. That's so lame. I whined and she laughed at my disgusted expression. There she is. A voice called out, and I looked over and sighed. Oh, it's her. I muttered. Mama instantly sent me a look. It's a girl from Sinnoh that said I stole Gibble. I told Mama hurriedly, and she started frowning as the Shellos girl was pulling a man that definitely looked like he was trying to relax on the beach along with her. Bernice, what have I told you about your volume? He said, and the girl winced at her father's rebuke. Sorry, Daddy. Alright, now. That is a Gibble. He said, sounding quite happy, actually a big smile on his face. A tiny one too. She's still growing. I retorted instantly as I held Gibble to the side of me like I was protecting her from bad words. Of course, of course. Excuse me. I'm Ian Sasaki. Haruka. Mama offered back and he smiled. A pleasure. Sorry to bother you, but Bernice mentioned a girl with a stolen Gibble, and urged me to investigate. I apologize for any disruption. Heh. Mama offered, smirking a bit, as she seemed to pick up on the fact the guy wasn't very impressed with his daughter's opinion. Then before I could say anything else, Bernice nearly shrieked. Is that a Riolu? Rio? Riolu questioned, perking up from the sand where she'd dug herself into a pit of sorts and was mostly out of sight. Yep. Riolu is one of my other Pokemon. I offered, and then Bernice slowly creaked her neck towards me, her face shifting. Bernice dash. I won't let you take the role of #1 Cynthia fan. That's me. She shrieked and I just had to blink. What a weird day. Chapter 114. Rio? Riolulu? Cynthia is the champion of Sinnoh. She's really strong, and she has a Lucario on her team. I explained to Riolu, who had wandered over at Bernice's shout wondering what was going on. That's right. Bernice added proudly, as if she had anything to do with that, and her father did a sort of eye roll in response. A Riolu, and a Gibble? Ian asked, as he watched on, and I nodded. Yep. My partner is Milotic as well. Cynthia and I have a lot of similar Pokemon. I said rather proudly. Why, you have a Milotic? Bernice screeched, and that finally seemed to get her father to do something. He reached out and dropped a hand onto his daughter's head, which quieted her as she shifted to look at him. Bernice. Volume. Yes, Daddy. Sorry about her. She's exuberant. It's all right. Mama offered, as she sat up. She was watching Ian with sharp eyes. Children are excitable about the strangest things. I hope there won't be any issues. I'll admit I'm definitely curious, but I'm just a vacationer here, just like you. He explained reassuringly, but there was a sharpness to his eyes, as he glanced at Gibble. I don't suppose I could offer you and your daughter a meal, in exchange for us asking some questions? I don't mean to pry, but official policy is that Garchomp and their line can only be found in Sinnoh. I opened my mouth to speak, but Mama shot me a look and my mouth closed. Right. I nodded at her. I'm afraid if you have any issues, then you should probably contact the Kanto Pokemon Association. Mama offered, and I nodded, keeping my mouth shut. Sounds like something a thief would say. Bernice offered with narrowed eyes, and I just rolled mine at her. I traveled outside Kanto and found lots of rare Pokemon. I didn't steal any of my friends. Humph. I don't believe there is any reason to assume theft, Bernice. Her father offered, but I got the feeling he probably was going to assume anyway. Fine then, Kanto girl. Kanto girl? Battle me. I'll beat you and prove you're just a Pokemon thief. Oh, that's it. I yelled, standing up and pointing a finger right back at this little brat. It's on Cynthia Wannabe. www. She shrieked, and I smirked. Hit. A nerve. Well, yeah. Not like me, right? You only have one Pokemon like Cynthia, but I have 3. Why you? She stuttered out into a glare, both her hands looking like she wanted to strangle me. Well. I guess a battle might get it out of her system. Stupid Cynthia Wannabe's father offered, and Mama just looked sympathetic. Vicky is fairly skilled. How well did your daughter do on her journey? Bernice? She hasn't gone yet. She's only 11. He replied back, suddenly looking a little nervous, as he looked at me. Who cares? I don't care how your stupid journey went. Battle me. She swept the entire league, and then won the conference, so completely people back in Kanto are still talking about it. She's preparing for her run against the Elite Four and champion. Mama cut in. I glanced back, and she just had a smug little look. Mama. Why were you hyping me up? Elite Four. Bernice stuttered out, absolutely shook at the statement. Hee hee. I offered, rubbing at my head. Mama, you don't have to put it like that. So? She's lying? Bernice asked, returning to her confidence and glaring. No. I'll face the Elite Four before the end of the year. I've even told Lance, the champion, that he can get one of my Pokemon if he wins to make sure he fights me all out. I explained. Bernice went still. Did I blue screen her? That's interesting. Bernice's dad offered, looking a bit uncomfortable, but I just shrugged. But I only have my young team with me right now. They're not really ready for that sort of thing yet. I looked at Riolu. Although they're growing stronger every day. Rio. She huffed at me and looked away, but I could tell she appreciated the compliment. So if you want to battle. Well, how about a one-on-one? I accepted, and Bernice twitched. That's right. I won't lose. FFF for Sinno. And Cynthia. Heh. Then as a Dragon Master of Kanto. I won't lose. For Kanto and Lance. Then I blinked and shrugged. Even if he's actually a flying type trainer. Vicky. Don't make that joke with people that won't get it. Especially to people from other regions. Represent our champion well. Mama demanded, and I just nodded. Right. Whatever. Bernice growled, and I nodded, looking around. Riolu? No, best not. Plus? I grinned. Dratini. I called out. A moment later his head popped out of the ocean and he slithered over, quickly climbing up my leg and then nestling his head onto my shoulder. I'll fight with Dratini. A Pokemon that represents Kanto. Humph. She huffed and pulled out her Pokeball. Then I'll beat you. Move out further on the beach. Mama ordered, and I nodded, stalking past Bernice much to her surprise as we moved away. Hey. She shouted, chasing after, and soon we found a clear section of the beach. I chose you. Dratini. Shellos. She growled back, and our Pokemon took the field. Actually, this could be a bad matchup. Shellos were special defense focused, and Dratini didn't train physical attacks yet. I grinned. I'm ready. So am I. Shellos. Muddy water. she shouted, and suddenly out from under the shallows came a swirling wave of water that was very brown. Gross. Don't let it get close. Dragon pulse area. I called out, and Dratini whistled as he actually surged forward, and just as the surge of muddy water shot forward, energy crackled and all the energy of his dragon pulse washed out from him, smashing into the water, and splitting the wave. Shallows. Use? Dragon pulse. Draw. He roared and unleashed his attack point blank. The beam attack was his natural one, with the cute water pulse like rings around his pulse. And it smashed right through shallows and sent the poor Pokemon sprawling. No. But Cynthia's Gastrodon wouldn't lose. I went to make another order as Bernice was obviously struggling but instead realized this was a bit mean. Teeny. Pull back. I called out, making sure he wouldn't get his second attack out, that I noticed he was already preparing. Heh. All that battle training was pulling off. Bernice had fallen to her knees. The skirt of her one-piece swimsuit was covered in mud and sand. I noticed as she lay sprawled with shallows, slowly trying to get back upright. I sighed. Right. She might be older, but she hadn't gone on her journey yet. I shouldn't treat her like someone my age, but someone who hadn't battled. Although even that was weird. I battled a bunch before I started my journey, just like everyone did. But I shook away my irritation with the girl, and instead walked over and settled across from her in the sand cross-legged. Hey, how's Shallows? I asked her, and she blinked out of her fog and reached out, snatching up her Pokemon and pulling it tight. Shallows? Shell. It assured her and just held it to her chest, before looking up at me. Muddy water was a good choice. That's a strong move. Cynthia's Gastrodon uses that move quite often in her battles. At least half the time. So I made sure Shallows learned it. That makes sense. She was one of those. The type that tried to math out Pokemon battles. Well, she'd learn on her journey. It should have worked. It did. It's a strong move. It forced me to react to you, which you could have capitalized on, but you hesitated, so I got the next move instead. I explained and she looked at me. Her face red and puffy from all the emotions running through her. Hey, I've got an entire journey worth of experience. You did well for battling before you even went on your journey. I guess. Come on, let's go to the Pokemon Center and get Nurse Joy to look at Shallows. I said, throwing out a hand to offer to pick her up. She pouted but reached out, and I hauled her up without issue. She yelped a bit as she was on her feet in an instant and I pulled her along. Hey. Come on. So what other moves did you teach our Shallows? Muddy water is really good. Being able to mess with the accuracy of opponents' Pokemon is super strong. Well, just Mudslap, Ancient Power, and Recover for now. She offered as we walked along the beach, her feet finally moving, so I let go of her hand. But I want to use Earthquake instead of Mudslap, and Stone Edge in place of Ancient Power. Let me guess, that's the move Cynthia's Gastrodon has? That's right. She argued, and I just laughed. That, and I need Sludge Bomb. I don't have the money for the TMs yet, but it's something I'll get on my journey. That's a good list of moves. Recovery, Muddy Water, Sludge Bomb, Earthquake, and Stone Edge. Solid typing and response. I agreed, really Cynthia was a monster. Humph. But I won't stop there. I'll get a Gibble, and a Riolu too. And Milotic. More Milotic in the world is always a good thing. I agreed and she nodded slowly, seemingly surprised at something I said. Right. You said you had a Milotic. Yep. He's my partner, my first Pokemon. A Milotic as your first Pokemon. You must be lucky. Lucky? I mean, I think I am, but it had nothing to do with luck. No one will say how you get a Milotic. You can't say it's not luck. You just have to find beauty in the world where no one else does. I explained without really explaining. I felt smug at my explanation. What does that mean? It's how to get a Milotic. Pokemon Center. I called out, and she twitched as we walked in. Right. Come on, Shellos, she said and hurried to the counter. Dratini on my shoulder watching on with me. She's kinda funny, I couldn't help but say to him, and he whistled a bit in turn. Bernice thanked me once her Pokemon was healed but ran off after, so I turned back to the beach to see what Mama was doing. By the time I got back everyone was eating a spread that Papa had brought, and Bernice's dad was nowhere to be seen. That girl not with you? Mama asked, and I shook my head. She left once she was done at the Pokemon Center. Girl? Vicky made a rival? Mama offered, although she seemed to hesitate to say it. I met someone very opinionated that her region's champion is the best. I decided and Mama snorted. Weird. Lance is the best. Papa offered without any guile, and I just rolled my eyes at him. And when I beat him? I asked, and Papa smirked, and I realized I fell into a trap. Then that means you beat the best and so you're the best of course. He roared out at the top of his lungs, and then scooped me up into a tight hug as he swung me around. Hey. Let me go. I whined but didn't struggle too hard as he was rubbing his cheek against mine. Never. My little future champ is gonna win it all. You. I whined, feeling my face heat up. Dra. Dratini suddenly joined in, he'd been scooped up and suddenly he was rubbing against my other cheek. Ah. It's not fair, don't team up. I whined, flailing my feet out and Papa just laughed even louder as my Pokemon betrayed me. Finally Papa set me down by the table he must have brought with and dropped a heavy hand onto my head. Eat up. Okay. I said, pouting at him. As I looked around, I couldn't help but smile as my team were all already eating. Papa and Mama must have set them up, even Gibble was settled beside Mama and she had a little plate of meats and berries, happily stuffing handfuls into her mouth. Mimikyu was on the beach towel next to Lucario and they were scarfing down, while Riolu was as usual making a mess. I grinned and grabbed my own food. Okay, so maybe I'd made a mistake somewhere in my life. I could admit that. Battle me, she shouted, finger pointed and her shellos out and looked ready. Pumped up almost. I blinked as I looked up from where I was holding Jangmo. The two of us had been playing in the water. Jangmo looked up at me and I looked down. Jang. Okay, if you want, I assured him, and his tail was already wagging, as his paws did little scratchies at the air. Okay, let's have another battle. I agreed, and stood up, wiping sand away from my butt as I positioned myself across from Bernice. Don't think it'll go the same way again, she shouted and I nodded. Jangmo scrabbled in the sand to get in position, his excitement almost making him sprawl out. Heh, I'm ready, she shouted, and I nodded. Ready. Shellos. Ancient power. Jangmo. Blast the rocks with Dragon Pulse. I retorted, and grinned as the rocks pulled from the sand and were launched off. Jangmo was on point. His Dragon Pulse shooting from his tail as it arced up, and broke each rock, one after another in quick succession until they crashed into the beach long before reaching him. And this time Bernice didn't just stumble. Shellos. Mud slap. They can't stop at all, she roared out and I grinned, as Shellos ballooned out a bit and then started spitting machine gun style mud towards Jangmo. Dragon Pulse. Area. I called out, and once again just like with Dratini, being able to push out in all directions was very useful. The mud slapped into the expanding energy force, and was all pushed back, but Bernice wasn't stopping. Again. Keep it up. Heh. Get in close. Then do it again, Jangmo. I was having fun. Watching two baby Pokemon fight it out was pretty cute actually. Jangmo had definitely picked up some things from his battles. Instead of charging straight ahead he kept juking side to side, relying on his four legs to let him keep speed up, as Shellos started spraying less and less accurately. Either tiredness, or just shock at missing? Either way Jangmo howled as he leapt into the air, legs sprawled as he got close enough and released another Dragon Pulse which flattened the area under him which poor Shellos had been unlucky enough to be inside. Then Jangmo landed with only a minor stumble and turned. Recover! Bernice yelled, but I just smirked. Far too early for that. Just because your Pokemon took a hit didn't mean they were out. Shellos glowed as it started healing, but Jangmo was too close. You can't heal right next to your opponent, and not expect to be punished. All out Jangmo. Jong. He roared as he unloaded a Dragon Pulse Pierce right into Shellos' back. The poor Pokemon squealed as it was blasted away, and Bernice, I noticed, was once more losing her flow. And was starting to stutter. That doesn't count as a loss. She held not long after as she scooped up Shellos and took off running to the Pokemon Center. What? Jang? Nah buddy, you totally won. Good job. I called out and he leapt into my arms as I spun him around. I challenge you. Okay, did I piss you off or something? I asked, pouting a bit. The sun was setting, and me and Mimikyu were having some together time. He was cradled in my arms as we watched the waves and just enjoyed each other's presence. I won't lose. I'll prove that Cynthia is the best. I already agreed with you. Cynthia's awesome. Great taste in Pokemon. I added, but this was the wrong thing to say. I'll beat you. She was definitely on a single track here. I sighed and looked down. Do you want to battle Mimikyu? Kukeikukeku? Eee. Bernice shrieked as she jumped back. Www what? This is Mimikyu. The cute Pokemon. I introduced and showed Mimikyu off a bit. There is no human alive that can survive his cuteness. Kook kook. He said to me, not comfortable with my words. Sorry buddy. I whispered back, that was a bit too much, so I just hugged him tighter in apology. It doesn't matter. I'll fight your Pokemon. That's not a good idea. Mimikyu isn't my strongest Pokemon, but he's really strong, you know? Bernice just gave me a look, a challenge. Well, our eyes had just met. Alright. If two trainers' eyes meet, they must battle. I agreed and rose up. Mimikyu. I choose you. Shellos. She stuttered and then it was once again facing Bernice. Muddy water. Shadow Sneak. The water washed over where he had been. As he simply dropped into shadows. Wah. Shadow Sneak is a ghost-type move. The Pokemon disappears into shadow. And then attacks. I told her, just as Mimikyu reappeared behind Shellos, and Bernice stuttered when she should have shouted, and Shellos cried out as Mimikyu swiped at the poor Pokemon. You use recover. Mistake. Mimikyu. Would hammer. And as Mimikyu spun around behind Shellos and then bonked it right on the head, Shellos the water type was hit with a super effective very powerful grass type move. Shell. It stuttered and then slumped. Wah. She shouted and I walked over and picked up Mimikyu. Sorry about the sand buddy. Kukuku. He responded as I felt him wiping at his disguise to get the sand out. How? You weren't prepared for my Mimisuit to have a powerful grass-type move. I explained, and I squeezed Mimikyu a bit tighter. Wood Hammer was a recoil move, so I was going to take him to the Pokemon Center after this. How do I keep losing? Experience and time. I said instantly. I went through a full year of battles and training where all I did was train my Pokemon, an entire team, and then another team on top of that. You only have your Shellos, right? Why yeah. See? That's it. Just time and experience. Battle more, and your Shellos will get stronger, and you'll get stronger as a trainer too. I always lose. She said, and I could see it. Her eyes getting more and more wet. Slowly fat wet tears formed in her eyes. No matter how many times I try. I always lose. She bawled, holding Shellos tightly to her chest. Oh. I want to be like Cynthia. But even when I use the same moves I still lose. She cried openly and loudly, and oh. That overbearing confidence she'd hadn't been just arrogance. It had been the opposite. Okay, I've decided. I said and then pointed, with Mimikyu backing me up a moment later with his own shadow hand pointing. I'm going to give you some battle training. Huh? Hee hee. You're going back to Sinnoh, and you'll rock your journey. I nodded. There, I'd just do a little teaching. Teaching didn't just help the student, but the teacher as well. Plus it stopped her from ugly crying. I just couldn't deal with that. Chapter 115. WWWY. Bernice cried out as I followed after her. Hee 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 hee. I cackled. Jibble was totally not aware of what was going on, but I'd threatened Bernice with a bite from Jibble if I happened to catch up. Eh. She cried and I just grinned. If you have the air to yell instead of run, then I'm not pushing you enough. I roared out from behind her. Gib. Ee. She continued to shriek, rather missing the point, and unfortunately she was screaming with her head in the air instead of watching where she was going, so down she went. Her foot missed a step and down she tumbled. I slowed down and kept my laughter in as she rose up and started spitting. Pft. Pft. Sand in my mouth. Yeah, it sucks. Come on. I reached down and grabbed her arm and helped her up, mostly just hauling her to her feet. Don't stop moving, or you'll cramp up. Come on, easy steps, let's get to the water and clean off that sand. You so mean. She cried out, still spitting out sand from her mouth, and I just rolled my eyes. This girl had no athletic ability at all. What was she supposed to do when she was chased by an angry? What were some of the scary Sinnoh Pokemon again? Whatever. Once we hit the ocean, she flopped onto her butt and just started scrubbing her face and using the water to spit out the sand. How is this training? She demanded at me, but I noticed she wasn't stuttering. How are you supposed to expect your Pokemon to train hard all day, if you can't do it too? I train alongside my Pokemon. I explained as I sat beside her, and Jibble instantly reacted. Gib. She called out as the first wave rushed up to her. She was waving her little claws into the water. But, she tried to argue, but I shook it off. Listen. I'm pushing you a bit right now, because I'm not going to take up your entire pre-journey vacation, right? But these are the fundamental things. What makes a trainer different from a good trainer? Or a great trainer? But running? You'll be walking for almost all of your journey. Didn't your teachers tell you to start exercising more? Yes, she mumbled, looking away. I just smirked at that reaction. Well, as someone who just had their journey, let me give you some advice. I started and then smirked, because well, I'd cheated on the normal journey issues. Although it's not like Chansey had ever let me not get my daily exercise in. First, if you can't walk along a path all day, then you aren't ready. Well, okay, you don't have to start that way, right? Your first few days will be walking into whatever location is close to your home and probably catching Pokemon, or battling and stuff, but you'll still be on your feet for a lot of the time. So get good shoes, and start jogging, a lot. Ugh. Cynthia is an archaeologist, you know? Of course I do. Well, do you think when she heads out into the wilds to explore ancient ruins, she doesn't make sure she's super in shape? I bet she could jog all day right alongside her Pokemon if she wants to. I honestly had no idea, but I'd bet money on it. But more importantly, comparing Bernice to Cynthia was a great motivation factor. Yeah. She agreed, her eyes radiating a bit more willpower than she had before. Good. Now. Second thing. Training. How much training have you done with Shellos? I've given her some TMs to give her stronger moves, and I participate in the battle club at school. Although it's not like I ever win. And there goes all of her motivation. Pfft. Who cares? Besides, that's not training. TMs aren't training, and so you aren't going to get anything out of a battle club. No wonder you lose. But that's what everyone does. Do they? I asked, looking at her with my most ludicrous look. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were an expert on training Pokemon. I gave her a flat look and she looked away at that. Sorry. No, it's okay, but you have a lot of expectations on what to do, and how to do it. But you're wrong. And that's okay. I yelled out, startling her. If you don't ever accept your preconceptions are wrong, you'll never improve. Now. Training. What makes up a Pokemon battle? Eh? Sorry, that's a vague question. What does your Pokemon do in a Pokemon battle? Battle? Right. But break it down. You've seen battles. Tell me every part of the battle that you can think of. Here, I'll give you an example. Moves. She looked a little confused at first, before finally giving a stuttered answer. Dodge? That's right. Dodging attacks. It doesn't matter how strong your opponent trained a move, if they can't hit you. Good answer. I threw up a thumbs up. Can you think of anything else? Orders? Teaching your Pokemon to trust in your orders and respond immediately. Huge answer. You're on a roll. Come on, what else? Let me offer a few more. Combinations. Does your Pokemon move combo into another? How about with an entirely different Pokemon? Having a Pokemon with Rain Dance can turn your electric type with Thunder, from an okay battler, into a monster. Huh? The move Thunder is pretty inaccurate, it's hard to control, but if it's raining, that accuracy shoots up, and suddenly your Pokemon is hitting right on target. I pointed at her with a finger like a gun and fired. Oh. I see. Move. Combinations. That's right. Like Sunny Day and Solar Beam. Nothing better than shooting a big strong move that normally takes time to charge over and over again. Heh. She laughed a bit at the idea, but then I held up a hand. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. So, see? There are tons of elements of a Pokemon battle. And many more that I haven't even touched on. So, what does that mean for how you trained your team so far? I only gave Shellos moves. That's it. Right. See? If you only focus on adding moves to a Pokemon, and that's it? You're missing out on 99% of the job. I looked out over the ocean. Pokemon battles are like the ocean. You might spend all your life on this beach, learning about every inch of it, but just over that rise? That's another beach. And a whole new world to explore. Sounds complicated. Heh. That's where training comes in. If you fight someone with a move you don't know, or a Pokemon you've never heard of, does that mean you instantly lose? No. Right. You move on to other parts of your training to overcome. Dodging, following orders, you'll have trained to overcome adversity. That makes sense. Okay, so, like I said, I'm not going to take up all your vacation time, but let me fill your head with some knowledge, okay? Go ahead and release Shellos. Shelly. Come out. I grinned at the cutesy nickname. As the pink Pokemon popped out into the ocean and instantly cooed happily at the water as it swiftly swam up with a wave and nestled itself in Bernice's legs. She likes you. I've had Shelly for a long time. We've been friends forever. That's sweet. I cooed, but then shook myself. Okay. So training. We just covered a bunch of different elements of a battle. So instead of me teaching you what to train, let me teach you how to train. That way, anytime in the future you find yourself lacking, you can come up with your own way to improve. Oh. Okay. So it's actually really easy. All you need to do is find out what you want to improve, and practice. Practice? Yep. Okay, take Jibble here for instance. I called out and Jibble sort of shifted upward at her name, but she was still focused on the ocean. She's very young. Totally not ready for a real battle, but I can still train her in the things she needs to know. I've been working with her on adding a new move. Dragon Breath. Okay? So, let's say I'm finding myself against a gym leader, and they have a type I can't overcome. So I need to teach Jibble a new move. First step. Find some way to teach them the basics. For me? I already had a Pokemon that knew Dragon Breath, and we've done some of the initial practice, but do you think Gibble can use the move with just that? Yes? Hee hee. Gibble used Dragon Breath. I called out to her firmly, and I felt her shifting a bit. Gib, she chirped, and then went quiet, but I felt her shifting under her scales as she gathered power. Shoo. Just watch. I whispered, and then Gibble opened her mouth. Gah. She exhaled, and just the faintest whiff of purple flames escaped her, actually causing a nice little sizzle noise on the ocean wave that washed up to her just a moment after. I felt a bit of warmth but not much on my legs. Good job. Woo. Giable. I cheered, lifting her up and swinging around, and then because I cared more about Gibble than Bernice, I danced and laughed as I fell back into the ocean and Gibble and I both went under and in the waves, which I could feel her little tail twitching as she found herself fully submerged. Then with a bit of effort I stood up and laughed as the water streamed off both of us. But the move didn't work? Bernice offered and I noticed Shellos looked confused at my actions too. Heh. You think that matters? You're thinking in terms of success being 1 or 2 tries. But success is 1,000, or 1,000,000. I called out as I plopped back into the sand. Watch. Gibble. Let's do it again. Dragon Breath. I called out, and this time it took a few moments as she was still distracted by the ocean, but eventually she adjusted herself a bit, telling me she was gathering energy. I felt her shaking a bit and then, gah. She exhaled, and that same flickers of purple flame puffed out of her throat. Yeah. You're getting it. I called out cheerfully, nuzzling her a bit and patting her on the belly. Good girl. Can you try again? Let's keep practicing. I called out, and then as I said it I looked at Bernice. My face smug as I gave her all the hints she could need. Gah. Almost instantly Gibble responded, and it was longer. The purple flame washed out, and actually crackled across the ocean waves. Hee 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 hee. You're getting it. Can you do it again? Dragon Breath. And there was no hesitation this time. Gibble opened her mouth. Gah. And out came a flame about as strong as the one before. Look how much you've improved. That's so amazing. I gushed over my little dragon and then looked at Bernice. Teaching something isn't just a 1-minute example, and then being done. It takes work. Hours of practice, and careful watch, making sure your Pokemon doesn't overdo it. And then, when they get it, when truly master it? That's what a trainer lives for. But Shellos already knows all of her moves. Does she? Or can she just use them? You saw it yourself just now. Gibble hasn't gotten the move completely figured out, but just a little practice, and she improved that much. You think you can't improve Shellos' moves with more practice? How many times has your Pokemon even used some of those TM moves you taught her? I nodded at her. It goes like that for everything. Moves, dodging, movement, even fighting. Look at fighting types. Just because they know Fire Punch, do you think that's all it takes? No way. Fighting types need to learn how to best use that move. It's all about practice. Bernice looked at Shellos and then nodded. Oh. Practice. You hear that, Shelly? You ready to practice your moves? Shell. It chirped and I smiled at the two. Great. I'm not done yet either, are we, Gibble? Let's see how much more we can improve your Dragon Breath. I called out, and laughed as Gibble instantly responded. Gib. That's right. I planted Gibble in the sand, sitting behind her, and mostly ignored Bernice. The fact is, I couldn't tell her exactly what to do, she had to learn that on her own. Just like how I'd once given advice on training to Ivy. If I just told her exercises that would give results, then all she'd ever do is copy them, but if you could get her to think, then maybe she could figure things out for herself. But for now, Gibble was my full attention. Gah. She exhaled, once more that purple flames licked out, but she had no endurance. Almost as soon as the flames exhaled, they ended and she was just standing there, mouth open, breathing. Was she just weak when it came to dragon energy? No, I've seen her use dragon rage, and that was plenty powerful enough. Okay, Gibble, try it again for me, I asked, while pushing my hands against her sides. I could feel her shifting. As she gathered energy, I could feel her little chest shifting as she breathed in, and then, gah, she exhaled. And, Gibble Gable, when you try to use dragon breath, close your mouth a bit more, don't let all of your air out at once, okay? I told her, I think. She was exhaling all the oxygen she needed for the flames all at once. Well, she was like a little balloon. She tried it again. And didn't seem to change much. So I reached out. Like this, I told her, and slightly adjusted her mouth to be a bit more narrow. Try it like this. Gah. She exhaled a moment later, and the flames licked out much further. Hee hee. You got it. Then she seemed to try it again, but, Gibble, you need to dash. I was cut off as her mouth had closed, with her cute little snaggle teeth, and a moment later it felt like she was rumbling, before her mouth opened, and smoke came pouring out of her once more opened mouth. Gibble, I gasped as she sort of slumped over. I picked her up and took off running to the Pokemon Center. Okay, that was a bit of a mistake, but we learned from that. Don't just keep the energy inside. Even if closing your mouth a bit lets you actually release the flames, try not to close your mouth all the way. Gib. I nodded, not sure if she really got it, but that was okay. She was back to normal now. Thankfully, Nurse Joy had assured me she hadn't really hurt herself, more shocked than anything. But she'd also been giggling up a storm the whole time she talked to me. Carrying her back to the beach instead of heading to rejoin Bernice, I gave the girls some space, and found Mama and Papa, and all the rest of my friends. Hey everyone! I called out as I arrived. Thankfully Mama and Papa had kept an eye out. Everyone was still playing in the waves or the sand, and I got calls from my team as I arrived, most of them rushing up to see me. Laughing as Jangmo ran in between my feet, nearly tripping me, while Dratini instantly wanted to climb up onto my shoulders despite being wet, and Mimikyu hopped all the way up and onto the top of my hat. I just laughed as everyone called out for my attention. Sorry. I was helping someone learn how to do some training, and then Gibble and I worked on her dragon breath. Gib. I almost didn't catch it, but I managed to tilt back, as I felt Gibble gather up her breath in my arms once again, and this time, when she exhaled, a real dragon breath came out. The purple flame shot up a couple feet into the air and actually kept blowing for a moment or two before the energy ended. Gib. Yeah. Good job, but let's be careful about using that when I'm not expecting it. I laughed, as Dratini had been forced to jump off my shoulder where he'd been hanging down to avoid the flames. That was awesome. A new voice called out, as I turned around and saw Lana with a fishing pole over her shoulder. What a pretty flame. Thanks. It's dragon breath. Gibble is learning it. Well, I think it's awesome. I was, wondering if you wanted to join me? She asked, and I noticed she had 2 fishing rods. I'd love to. I called out. I'd been playing around most of the morning, but we had gotten some training in, but some fishing sounded awesome. Great. I know this place that's the best for fishing. She called out, and was about ready to start running when I had to stop her. 1 SEC. Let me get everything settled here. I laughed, as my Pokemon were still circling around me. Alright. Let's go fishing. Let's return for now, okay? My Pokemon all chirped, as I started with Gibble, before bringing everyone back, then I stopped and headed over to my parents. I'm gonna go fishing with Lana, I can take the egg. Alright dear. Mama offered, as she pulled off the towel that covered the incubator, to keep the sun from getting too much on it, and I picked up my incubator and headed after Lana. Fishing. Only instead of heading up into the island, Lana released her Lapras. Oh, it's not here on Melee. It's on Akala. Come on. I blinked. I hadn't left Melee yet. But I shrugged and jumped onto the Lapras, and soon as we were heading away Lana handed me a fishing pole and we both started laughing and swapping stories as we floated off. So this is Akala Island? Yep. Lana called out as she returned Lapras and the two of us were on a different beach. Instantly I noticed the difference. While there were those on the beach, none of them were foreigners like me. I don't see any tourists here. Nah, that's only Melee. The other islands don't let tourists come around. Lana offered with a shrug which I nodded along. I guess that made sense. Melee didn't have that many rare Alolan-only Pokemon. Not the special ones anyways. You wouldn't find any Jangmo on Melee. Come on. We can get a ride Pokemon to get up to the pond. Lana called out and I laughed as I chased after her. I noticed I got quite a few looks, but Lana was at my side and so no one seemed to make any real fuss. It felt nice, and honestly as we came up onto the road, and then into a ride Pokemon barn where the two of us got on some Tauros and then raced out of the city on dirt roads, it felt awesome to look around and wonder what is out here. Sure, I didn't know Melee well either, but this was a whole new island to explore. We ended up ambling along a dirt trail for a long while before suddenly the trees seemed to split, and I could hear rumbling water. Then there it was. Whoa. Welcome to Brooklet Hill. Lana called out and I had to gasp as I looked around. The whole place was multiple ponds that all flowed down the side of the island, into more ponds, with waterfalls flowing down between them. It was beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. Like it, do you? Lana asked, the girl having come right up to my Tauros and practically invading my personal space with such a smug grin. I love it. Well, come on. I'll show you my favorite places. Please do. Oh man, Jibble would love this place. And so would Dratini. And, well, just about everyone. Come on. Lana called out, waving her fishing rod above her blue hair as she was already running up to the first pond. I just had to shake my head and jump off the Tauros, giving his nose a quick pat and thanks for the ride, before chasing after her, the borrowed fishing rod held over my shoulder too. Chapter 116. Wahahaha. I cackled as Lana slumped. The wishy-washy, the same one, was on the hook again. For like the 10th time. It's not funny. No, you're right, because you were saying you were going to catch the biggest fish in the entire pond? It's hilarious. I cackled and she scooped the wishy-washy off and chucked him back in. It's not fair. If he'd stop going after my lure. Switch lures. I did. She cried out, and I couldn't help but laugh all the louder. Brooklet Hill was an amazing fishing spot, not so much because of the range of Pokemon, neither Lana or I were catching Pokemon to capture or anything, but because of the views. I settled down and kicked my feet a bit in the cool water. Looking straight forward as the pond reflected the sun, and then out even further into the ocean, past the waterfall. It was honestly gorgeous. Gib. I looked over as Jibble happily splashed around, in a shallow spot. Dratini was actually playing with her, not that I think she even noticed, but he was having fun. I looked behind me. Jangmo was splayed out taking a nap, and Riolu had gotten tired of running around in the shallows splashing a whole lot and purposefully trying to scare away the fish, like the little brat she was, and was currently curled up with Jangmo. The two of them were snoring away. I looked over and Gummy was in the shade of some trees nibbling at the leaves, seemingly enjoying the different tastes. I relaxed, all my friends were having a good time. Kuk. Mimikyu called out and I grabbed the fishing rod with him as we caught something. I pulled and tugged, and slowly reeled it in, and wee-yay. Wishy-washy. Pfft. Lana instantly started laughing as the curse seemed to have spread to me. I think he's cute, so I'm not upset. I decided with a laugh as I reached over and tugged the fish from the lure. I don't know what you want, but as long as you're having fun, that's okay. I told him before slipping him back into the water. Yeah. Ugh. I just wanted to catch something big. Like a giant fin neon. The size of a Tauros. That'd be a big fish. Can you even pull something that large? Of course I can. I once caught a legendary Pokemon. Huh? Really? Oh well, I don't tell the story very often. She demurred, but then instantly started going into a story about how she'd caught a kyogre. I don't believe you. I decided after her story was done, and she flushed and puffed up. It's true. Your fishing rod couldn't hold against a kyogre. I'd be more likely to buy it if you mentioned something about your rod pulling you into the water, as a kyogre swam past and it broke your line. That's not what happened. I said, not at all hiding my disbelief. Lana growled at me, but it was all in good fun, and she was soon gasping as her rod tugged. I smiled as her own happiness shattered. It's wishy-washy again. She cried out, growling as she tugged on the rod until finally, she yanked hard and out came that same wishy-washy. Wee-I. It cried out in surprise at seemingly being caught again. Growling. I've had enough of you. She shouted, grabbed the wishy-washy, and it almost looked like she was going to just squeeze the poor fish to death, but instead she stepped back and threw him far into the distance. Get lost. She roared. That was a bit mean. How many times do I have to catch the same stupid wishy-washy? She shouted to the sky, and I just laughed at her aggravation. Then the entire pond started rippling. Lana? I just wanted to catch a big fish to show it off. She cried to the skies, but I was more interested in the way the entire pond rippled and waves started washing up over my knees. Lana? It's not fair. Lana? I cried out, fully yelling to get her attention, because out from the center of a pool was a massive wishy-washy school. The faux fish opened its maw and actually roared out as it started rushing towards us. Oh! Lana whispered before shrieking and turning to bolt, only for a wave of water to wash over the entire area we'd been hanging out on. I barely had a moment to gasp and hold the egg incubator, as Mimikyu shrieked as the water flowed over us and washed all of us out. Gibble. I didn't have a moment to check before I heard Riolu and Jangmo's surprised cry at being hit by the wave. Then it was over, and we were dragged around by the wave, with Lana just barely managing to cling on before being pulled into the pond. I cleared my nose as I held onto the incubator and glared at the angry Pokemon. Totem. For sure. Hadn't this been the place the totem Pokemon hung out in the game and anime? Think so. Hey. That was mean. I called out even as I kicked my feet, swimming backwards to make it back to land. Hey. Lana called out, sounding way less confident than normal as she glared down at the massive wishy-washy. Waya. It roared out, and suddenly in front of its face water seemed to gather before exploding out, washing over Lana in a rather nasty water gun. That looked like it hurt. I made it back to semi-dry land and checked on everyone. Incubator? Safe. Riolu and Jangmo looked waterlogged, but they were fine. Gibble? Dratini had her coiled around her to keep her safe. She was floating along the waves and probably hadn't even noticed. I looked up. Wet cloth met my eyes. Coo. Mimikyu whined, and I could feel him sort of trying to squeeze all the water out of his disguise. Alright. Lana? Poplio. You use bubble. She cried out, and bubbles exploded out of her Poplio's nose. Wishy-washy instantly popped it back with a water gun that sent both girl and Pokemon spinning. Ouch. I got up and hurried away from the edge of the water to not get sucked down again, and only turned around when I was far enough away that I could protect the incubator. Alright. If you want a battle, you've got one. Riolu. Vacuum wave. I called out, and she nodded, not hesitating in planting her feet and charging her attack. I guess ruining her nap had pissed her off too. The first wave of energy hit the wishy-washy and it cried out, and I noticed a few of the fish where it was struck fell away. The totem though didn't care, turning to me and gathering energy towards Riolu. Just keep firing. Jangmo. Dragon Pulse area the attack. Protect Riolu. Brave. Attack when you can. Jang. He roared and planted his feet in front of Riolu. The first water gun burst towards them, and he leapt up. Energy exploding out of him and splitting the wave. Although it was just too much, and he ended up flying back and into Riolu, disrupting her footing. I smiled though. Instead of being angry or something, she'd actually cancelled her attack and reached for Jangmo to grab him. She could have dodged and let him go flying, or even something worse, but she hadn't. Good girl. Almost like she could feel my thoughts, she looked up from the mud where she'd been sent skidding and barked at me angrily. Rio. Rio Lulu. Rio Lu. I know. I growled back, but thankfully neither of the two were in any danger. An arc of energy shot out from the woods. Brave was entering the fray and her dragon pulse smacked the Wishawashi out of another attack. Mimikyu, you want a little payback? Kuyuyukeku. He hissed darkly. Shadow Ball. I roared, and then pointed at Riolu. She was still glaring at me, but with my eyes I told her what to do, and she scoffed, pushing Jangmo away, and gathering up a vacuum wave. The Shadow Ball was dodged by the Wishawashi, as it dove quickly to avoid the attack, but as it popped back up, it prepared an attack towards me, only to get blasted by Riolu. Lulululu. She cackled at the fish's surprised look as it crashed back into the water. Alright. Lana called out, as she was back on her feet and Poplio was looking more confident. Us too, Poplio. Bubble. I nodded as with 3 different attacks, Wishawashi was hesitating to finish an attack. Huh. Then suddenly the pond glowed green. Oh no. That was Heal Pulse. I managed to shout out just in time for the Wishawashi to leap out once again, and I noticed, with the entire school restored around it. Bubble. Lana called out, but I shook my head. That wasn't going to work, we needed to stop this somehow. I did want a Waterium Z but, not at the risk of my friends, and this totem was getting pretty aggressive. Its next attack wasn't water gun, but a hydro pump, splashing across the entire beach and sending all of us flying as I curled around the incubator. Hey! We give up. I don't know why you're so mad, but how about we stop here? I shouted out, after I regained my feet, but the totem glared at me, and another water attack was gathered and blasted out. The poor tree I ducked behind was wrecked, but it kept me from getting sent flying again. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Riolu. Together. Jangmo. Blast him, Dragon Pulse Pierce. I roared out as I settled the incubator down behind the broken tree and rushed forward, already feeling my Z-ring starting to glow as I planted my feet and started the movements. The sumo split leg straight up. Drop it down, sumo stance. Right leg shift, stomping the ground, the energy bloomed within me, as Riolu and I were in sync. Both of us wanted to push this stupid fish. Arms up and then spread wide, both fists punching forward, wrists crossed, rapid punches. Double punch. And then a palm pushed forward. All out pummeling. I roared, as the energy burst from me to Riolu. Jangmo had done well, helping Lana distract the totem. But it was rolling backwards across the cross, having been hit so hard he had turned into a ball and was skipping across the ground. Riolu started moving. The power pouring off her. Rio. Rio 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 Rio. The totem wasn't expecting it. The Wishawashi, distracted by Lana and Jangmo, turned to get a face full of the first energy palm, and the next and then more and more. I bit back on the energy, kept the flow from me into her steady, and Riolu controlled herself, pouring the energy into the attack at a slow and steady rate. Huh. All the vacuum wave training had actually paid off. I could feel her working with me. Together, the two of us, holding the energy flowing between us steady and releasing it without pumping too much into an attack, or wasting it. Then it was over, and our connection ended. And both of us slumped a little at the drain. Finally Wishawashi flopped back into the water, causing a large wave, but that wasn't an attack, but the fish learning a lesson. Huh. Start shit, get hit. I laughed, and Riolu laughed at my words, pumping her fist just as much. Of course that didn't really solve the issue. The light of another healing pulse glowed within the pond, and I sighed. The Wishawashi rejoined the school, but there weren't as many as before. I'd done some real damage. Okay. We need to find the healer and stop it. I called out, but before I could focus on that I was back to dodging around a bit as hydro pumps blasted out, and I tucked and rolled to avoid most of the water. It was still enough to clip me and send me rolling and sliding. Stupid fish. If I had Milotic here, this wouldn't be an issue. Heh. I felt it though. The grin stretched across my face. A battle. A fun, actually difficult battle. Bubble. Poplio. Lana called out, sounding angry, and I just grinned as I regained my feet, ignoring the pain in my side. Blast him! I called out, and my Pokemon reacted. Jangmo, Brave and Riolu all shooting another attack into the totem. Mimikyu suddenly shifted and then blurred forward, before I could react. Mimikyu! I gasped as he raced forward, and then seemed to use Riolu's vacuum wave as a touchstone to get closer to Wishawashi. It had a moment, where I heard it roar, but the roar was made up of a few hundred little gasps as Mimikyu spun around and dropped a wood hammer onto the fish. Mimikyu! I gasped, and I made to rush forward. He used the recoil to launch himself backwards, but he wouldn't make it all the way. I charged, and just as I hit the lake I leapt. Kook! He cried out as I appeared just below him. My hand reached out, and just as he hit I flung him up and back. Then I hit the water, which was probably not safe. The totem was back down in the water. Mimikyu's super effective wood hammer, being a grass-type move, had really knocked the school silly. But it still turned, and the glowing eyes that made up the foe eyes locked onto me. The Alamamala I saw as well, its pink scales flashing as it moved to get close and heal the Wishawashi, when, gribble! I shrieked, when suddenly from above the pink fish Gibble dove down through the water, and I don't know who was more shocked, me, or the Alamamala that suddenly had a Gibble biting down onto it. Didn't sharks eat Mola Mola? Heh, well, they do now, 'cause Gibble was showing no signs of letting go. Crap. I nodded. Dratini was there, and he blasted a dragon pulse right into Alamamala's face, certainly knocking it out, and then wrestling Gibble back out of the water. Good. I didn't want her drowning. I kicked my feet and just managed to gasp for breath when the Wishawashi surfaced right in front of me. Well, come on then, I shouted back in its face. Then I was suddenly dunked. GHBLBLHH. I gasped, inhaling as something had landed on my head and pushed me down, and then as I looked up, Riolu, you little shit. She'd used me as a springboard, but she'd leapt from the shore onto my head, and then right into the center of the Wishawashi, and as I fought back to the surface to gasp and cough. You brat! I finally yelled a bit as I caught sight of Riolu doggy paddling back towards the shore. Rio! That's not a reason you had to jump on my head, I yelled, swimming back towards the shore as the Wishawashi was rather busy dealing with quite a headache, so to speak. So was I. I made it back, and Lana was there helping haul me out of the water. Are you okay? I'm fine, I grumbled, still coughing a bit. But I looked over. Everyone was okay. Gibble was even struggling against Dratini a bit as she was 1000% down to dive back into the water and take a bite out of the Alamamala. Heh. Or she just wanted to swim some more. I shook it off, and waited, and finally what popped up was a single Wishawashi. It cried, literally, big crocodile tears as it stared at us. Don't blame us for this. We were just here to have fun. You're the one that turned this into a battle, I argued back, ignoring its pathetic look. Then as I stared at it, I sighed, and reached into my pouch. It jerked a bit as I pulled out an oranberry. Here. Eat this and share it with your friend as well, since you both got hurt being silly. The oran flew through the air and landed with a quiet plop right next to the crying fish. It looked at me, its eyes still watering, and then dived down. I sighed and flopped back onto the mud, ignoring the way it stuck to me. Lana looked around at the devastated area and just flopped as well. Her Poplio flopped into her lap looking up at her, and Lana just sighed. That. Sorry. For what? I asked, surprised at the sudden words. This was supposed to be fun, just a fishing trip, show you another island. Even Kahuna Hala mentioned that he wanted us to show you around Alola if we had time, and I thought it would be fun to go fishing with someone. Mallow goes sometimes, but she's not really into it. This was fun though? I said, and then when she gave me a look like she didn't believe me, all I could do was start laughing. We just had a massive battle with a totem Pokemon, and I used my entire team. And I even had to use a Z move. Yet look. I pointed out my team, all of whom were standing proud at the battle. Well, other than Mimikyu, who looked a little sodden. Sorry Mimi. We'll both need to find a spot to dry out, or find a fire type that can do it. Puukekayak. He said a bit darkly, and I just held out my arms so he could run up and get a hug. You really don't mind? Nah, this was fun. I mean, I prefer to choose when I go into a battle, but sometimes battles happen, and you just have to deal. I got up and wiped myself down a bit. How about we gather everything up and head out of here? I'd kill for something hot right now. Me too. Lana muttered and stood up groaning. As she realized her fishing rods were both gone, swept away. I found my incubator and sighed as it was fine. The glass tube was still warm and doing just fine. Strapping that to my chest, I looked around and gathered up my friends. Jibble and Dratini were still floating around, and Rio Lujangmoo, and, has anyone seen Brave? I asked, looking around. Goomy. I looked up. Huh. Climbed all the way up there to get out of the splash zone, huh? Goomy. She said, sounding proud of herself as she was way up on a branch in the trees. Want to jump? I offered, holding up my hands, and she hesitated a moment, before woogling a bit forward and then falling. I caught her easily and she giggled a bit at the pressure, as I settled her on my shoulder. Goomy. She called out as I headed to the others. All right. This was certainly not how I planned for a fishing trip to go, but sometimes this is just the way things went. Need any help? No, the Pokemon aren't bothering Poplio, and she's good about tracking down missing rods. Lana said as she was still waiting at the side of the pond, as Poplio popped up and down. That doesn't look like rods? She's a bit of a scatterbrain. Lana offered with a smile as she had a handful of random shiny things, including some fishing gear, that looked old. And as we waited for Poplio, Dratini floated by, acting like an inner tube, keeping Jibble afloat as she happily splashed in the water. Gib. I just sighed and dropped my head into my hands. What was I going to do with that girl? Chai. I startled as Awashi was at the surface, staring at us, with his crocodile tears. Yes? I asked, as I knelt down and he opened his mouth. Oh. Waterium Z. Lana. I think this one is for you. I mentioned, because in that Washi's mouth were 2 Z crystals. Huh. She gasped, looking at the crystal that was meant for her, and then she hesitated. What's wrong? I can't. I didn't earn it. Not really, this was your battle more than mine, and I haven't even started my trial. Sorry. Don't say sorry. Say thank you. I corrected, and she blinked. And then she smiled a bit. You're right. Thank you, Wishawashi, but I can't accept it. Yet. I'll be back someday. And when I do, I'll earn that Z crystal from you for real. Chai. It muttered as it seemed to swallow back the Z crystal, before bouncing out of the water, leaping high for a moment, and then disappearing. What a weird fish. Yeah. Chapter 117. Well, looks like you two had an adventure. Kahuna Olivia. Lana called out as the woman approached us. We had just dropped off the Tauros at the Ride Pokemon barn and walked into the main city of Heihea. Standing on the sidewalk, still dripping wet, and looking like wild mooks, had probably attracted some attention. Hee. I offered a bit awkwardly, as I rubbed at the back of my head. I heard you had some trouble with the Brooklet Hill totem. Lana sort of stuttered awkwardly, and I slumped. The Wishawashi totem was a meanie. I decided to say, and Olivia snorted out a laugh before shaking her head. How did you know? I'm the Kahuna. She replied to Lana's question with an arrogant tilt to her head before looking over the two of us. I see you got your Waterium Z. I did. The Wishawashi gave it to both of us after the battle. I said, looking at Lana, who looked away quickly. I didn't accept it. I didn't say anything. Olivia offers before smiling. You could have, you know? Lana just shook her head. I'm not on my trial yet. Besides, I only helped a little. I'll earn it for myself. At Lana's words, Olivia smiled brightly. That is a good spirit to have. I look forward to the day I'll see you walking around with your Z-ring. Thank you. Lana whispered, obviously flattered. Should I offer you a grand trial? I instantly responded, a little caught off guard, before the woman smirked. No, not quite yet. I want to see your rematch with Hala first at least. Huh? He told you about that? I'm the kahuna. She repeated, and I couldn't help but snort. That just meant the kahuna shared gossip with each other for sure. So after I battle Hala again? Yes, I think that would be good. Perhaps a little later as well. This is your first visit to Akala. You should explore the island. Learn from it, first. Yes, I think that would be best. I'll do that. I promised, and Olivia nodded, pleased. I look forward to it. I heard you are training a young team? Yep. I caught a bunch of younger Pokemon. I'm working with them right now, I said, patting at my Pokeballs. Everyone was currently resting inside their Pokeball after the crazy battle we'd just had. Interesting. It's rare that a trainer as accomplished as you makes a completely new team. Well. I wanted to train them all up, and I learned a lot from my first team. My babies are going to grow to be even stronger than my first team, and then I can use them to make my first team stronger. It's gonna be fun. You're training a team to challenge your own team? Well, sort of. That's one benefit of it anyways. How interesting. She was looking at me with a calculating eye, but in the end she just smiled. Well, I hope your visit to Akala was, if not pleasant, at least a fun adventure. Oh, I had a great time. I agreed, and Olivia smiled, pleased. With that, Olivia bid us good night, and Lana and I rushed to the ocean to get back to Melee before night fully fell. No, go back to sleep, I muttered, as I was poked in my face despite burying my head into my pillow. Riolu. I opened my eyes and glared at Riolu, but she was actually not trying to mess with me. Hungry? Rio. Yeah, alright. We'd crashed when we got back to the island the night before, and between limited sleep and how much we'd run around the day before, I guess I'd really slept. It wasn't even late in the morning, but I'd gone to sleep earlier than I had been. I sat up and stretched, noticing everyone else was already up. Pokemon endurance, I guess. Only Gummy seemed to be still napping. She was still in her water plate. Where was Gibble? I got up and breathed a sigh of relief. I'd blocked the bathroom door, and that was still in place and not eaten through or anything. Instead, oh my. I whispered quietly, because unlike usual, Gibble was actually interacting? Riolu had turned the TV on at some point, or Jangmo-o, both of them seemed to like watching TV, and Dratini had joined them, only Gibble had apparently gone out of her way as well. Gibble was currently sitting on the floor, mouth open like normal without a brain cell active, but Dratini was wrapped around her, and she even had her arms holding him against her. Oh my. Oh my, oh my. Did Gibble Gable decide she liked Dratini? Was the Chad energy already working? This family was too dangerous. No, she was too young for that. Probably she just wanted to go swimming and the Dratini inner tube was too good. Heh. Alright, how about we all head out and get some food? I asked the group and got interested looks from my team. Cook. I looked down, where Mimikyu crawled out of my bag. Oh, the other disguise not dry yet? He shook his head, causing his Milotic tail to flop around a bit. Just felt like a change? That got a happy floppy head nod, and I grinned as I held out my arms, and he jumped into them without a word. Well, you're going to definitely get some attention, that'll be fun. Alright, everyone, let me get ready and we'll go. And they were back to watching TV and mostly ignoring me. Heh. Oh. Look at him. Another girl cooed in delight as Mimikyu waved his hand at her, and she gushed. The older Alolan girl was ready to tackle Mimikyu, I could tell, but I kept my signature look of superiority up as only I possessed the melodic Mimikyu. He's the best. I agreed magnanimously, and the girl kept cooing over Mimikyu. I've never seen a Mimikyu make a different disguise than a Pikachu. Well, my buddy knows the truth. Pikachu are well liked, but there are way cuter Pokemon. Him being one of them. I laughed as he tangled his claws into my hair for a moment, obviously embarrassed. Now I want a Mimikyu. Do you think they'd wear an Eevee costume? Oh, I'm sure you could convince them. Hee hee. There you are. A voice called out and I looked away towards Bernice. She was. Did you sleep last night? I did. She growled, her hair was a bit messy like she. Oh, she'd probably rushed out of her room the moment she woke up or something. Okay? Battle me. I looked at her, and considered it, before nodding. All right. I agreed. Right after breakfast. Hungry? You know. She stuttered and then glared and I shrugged. Okay, food first. I decided and looked at the older Alolan girl that was laughing, as she walked away waving, which I returned. Then ignoring Bernice, I walked off to go to a nice restaurant that I had tried a few times and they had good Pokemon food. Bernice followed petulantly, but as she took a seat across from me her stomach rumbled, and she ended up ordering as well. While she did that I released my team and settled them in, and Bernice looked between all my Pokemon. What are you doing? She asked, and I quirked an eyebrow at her, before turning to the waitress. Can I get 6 Pokemon meals? 3 spicy, 1 bitter, 1 sweet, and Gibble Gable will eat literally anything. I ordered and the waitress nodded as she started writing it down while Bernice just looked confused. And then just a breakfast platter. And for you? The waitress asked and Bernice looked confused. I rolled my eyes. Was I going to have to teach another blonde how to feed her Pokemon? Yes. Yes, I was. When Bernice finally ordered, I started speaking. Okay, so I can see an issue. What is your Shellos' favorite flavor? What? Okay, this is going to take longer than I thought. First step of any trainer, as soon as you catch a Pokemon, you have to feed them, so you need to figure out what they want to eat. I pulled up my bag and grabbed some berries. Time to find out. During breakfast as we ate, I went through everything Bernice would need to know about basic nutrition stuff. Well, at least explaining what she'd have to keep in mind, and that she could always turn to a Nurse Joy for more help. Funnily enough, once I managed to get through to her about how important it all was, she pulled out a notepad and started actually writing it all down. It was cute. So, the flavor a Pokemon likes is really important. Bernice whispered, looking at the notepad of notes she'd been taking. Yep. A trainer's job is more than just moves, exercise, more than orders. I told you yesterday, right? But this is too much. She whined, covering her head. I feel like my head is full. Hey, it's not that bad. You don't need to remember all of this constantly, just have some basics, and if you don't want to specialize in it, then go to a specialist. Nurse Joy, love it when you stop in asking about your Pokemon's nutrition. Trust me. I had Blissey to figure everything out, but having Nurse Joy help is amazing. I'll remember that. She decided firmly. Scribbling away. I just smirked and pointed. You should eat. Huh? Oh right. She finally put her pad away and I looked at her Shellos, which was very happily munching on a bitter poke meal that the restaurant set up. The roast berries inside the meal were very quickly being swallowed down. Poor thing. She probably hadn't liked the normal food Bernice had been feeding her. Seriously, so many people just bought the poke chow they'd seen their parents buy and never thought that was for Pokemon lazing around the house. Not Pokemon actively training and battling. I sighed. Nothing you could really do about it. Maybe a nutrition explanation for new trainers? Handed out to them when they left? No, they were a bunch of kids, that shit wasn't going to get read. No, what they needed was someone to explain it to them. To show them how to do it. Just like with Bernice, she had been obstinate at first, before I explained it. I quickly shook my head, throwing out the idea that kept creeping in my head. It wasn't me. I didn't want to be that. I just wanted to be lazy and play with my friends. You okay? Fine. I said as Bernice looked up at me, and she was staring. Okay. Battle after this? Sure. That would take my mind off it. Off the idea that I could be the responsible one. Use muddy water. Bernice yelled out, and I nodded, as Dratini was already preparing, and as the water washed over towards him a twister shot out, scooping up the water and trying to push it back. It just managed to overcome the power of the wave and I breathed a sigh of relief. No. Bernice cried out, which was a mistake. Instead of staying focused she started realizing she was losing and so didn't keep calling out orders. Not long after Shellos was done and I walked over, to her pouting form. You shouldn't panic like you did. If a move doesn't work or something fails, just keep calling out orders. Your Pokemon relies on you for that. I panicked. I can't just need more experience. I get it though. I tend to get mad when someone gets the drop on my Pokemon and hurts them. I'll beat you next time. There you go. I look forward to it. Don't forget to keep training. You did better this time. I offered to her as I stood up and stretched. Wabut. I can't hold your hand, Bernice, and I declared, pointing right in her face. You're on vacation. Don't forget your journey hasn't even started yet. So don't stress too much. Just integrate some training into your routine, and when your journey starts you'll already be ahead. Alright. Thank you. She offered after a moment, looking away as if refusing to look at me when she said it. I blinked, a little surprised at her words. I honestly hadn't expected her to really thank me. You're welcome. I decided, smiling at her, and reached out and patted her shoulder. You have the potential. Just keep trying to improve. There is always something new to try, to see if it makes you even stronger. I will. Alright. I'm off. See you later. Bye. I put my hands behind my head as I considered what to do. Olivia had offered me to explore Akala, and honestly, it sounded kind of fun. Just a day of exploring and seeing new Pokemon? There were tons of Pokemon I'd never actually seen in real life. I'd just need to get a ride Pokemon to travel to another island. Well, right after I told my parents. That was exhilarating. Maybe I'll catch one myself. Mama said as we handed off the Sharpedo to the ride Pokemon controller. I grinned at her words. She'd certainly gone full out with her Sharpedo, despite her normally lazy pace. Mama is scary. Heh. Don't you forget it. She said, pointing at me imperiously. I just grinned because now that we were back on dry land, Meowth leaped out of the bag Mama and stuffed him into, and was looking at both of us with very obvious dislike. Don't be like that. I told you, you could stay with Victor. Mama cooed, and soon Meowth was rubbing against Mama's hand. She was like really good with dark-type Pokemon. Wait. Mama. Did you ever have any dark types on your team? Huh? My team? No, you know that. Meowth, Fearow, Poliwhirl, Weepinbell, Electrode, and Beedrill. You know that. She offered, counting off her fingers as she spoke. You should have got some dark types. You connect with them really well. Mama looked at me, and then dropped a karate chop on my head. Ow. That could be seen as an insult. Trouble. Mama grumbled at me. As if I'm some dark type trainer. Dark types are great. Mama pouted at me as she walked off, and I couldn't help but giggle. I think I'd hit a mark and she was embarrassed. Never ran into a Murkrow? Yes. No. She denied, pouting, but as we walked through the city she finally opened up. I did travel through Johto a few times, and I met one once. I was already maxed out. He was a cute bird, probably a bit too into Fearow. She explained, and I giggled again. It was funny how that could happen. Maybe you should catch a dark type. Then I looked at Meowth, who was glaring at me. Another dark type anyways. Since you have Meowth. Heh. Meowth was glaring at me, as if daring for Mama to need another Pokemon besides her. You know Meowth is gonna have an interesting reaction when we bring a new Meowth home. Oh, Meowth will be fine. Mama offered, but I just sent her my most disbelieving look and she promptly looked away and ignored me. I'm not dealing with him. He'll learn to appreciate a new friend. Besides, he could use the help with all the Growlithe around. Meow? Meowth asked, suddenly hearing that, and Mama just scratched her chin. Oh, don't you worry about that. Mama offered, and I had a feeling Mama was purposefully lying to the poor cat. Mama was mean. Dark type. Total dark type. We ended up going through the city and then onto the routes. Mama was smiling happily as we trundled along on the back of a pair of Tauros as we looked all around the tropical paradise, and it was. The jungle only grew more and more lush and beautiful, and it was like exploring the Amazon, only full of cute Pokemon. We saw Metapod hanging from trees, which made Mama and I both relax, and then as we passed a Trumbeak flew past and Mama looked in shock, never having seen one. Heck, neither had I. Then a coconut or a berry? Not sure, flew over our head, and a trio of Possimian jumped through the trees above us hollering at each other. Wadash? Possimian, a fighting type. They love throwing things to each other, it's a form of training. I'll never get used to that Pokemon brain of yours. We've only been here for a few weeks and you can already name out every Pokemon. Ehehe. I laughed off the statement, couldn't exactly admit to decades of Pokemon nerdery. Oh look. Those are the Pokemon Ivy had. Mama called out, and I grinned as we came to a sunny patch through the jungle, and an entire spread of Fomantis were napping in the sun. Fomantis? So cute. I cooed, as I watched the grass types napping in the sun. Are they friendly? Nope. I laughed at Mama's question. The ones Ivy caught chased her around. Oh, that's right, you told me about that. That's how you met Riolu. I pouted this time and grumbled. I could nearly feel the pokeball on my hip wiggle as Riolu laughed. That little brat. Oh look. Mama called out. What's that Pokemon? Mama asked, and I looked over and stilled. That. Oh shit. Alola. That was the generation before they got rid of the moss rocks. I knew 100% there existed a moss rock on Alola. A moss rock. That lets Eevee evolve into Leafeon. And right there, sunning itself on a big rock near the edge of the field, was a Leafeon. I swallowed. The Eevee issue had been something I'd been trying to figure out since Seras brought it up. Hadn't Pinery mentioned she had pictures, but they still had trouble verifying it. Mama. Don't move. I whispered, and drew out my camera from my bag. Mama thankfully went silent as both Tauros stopped and didn't ask any questions as I started snapping pictures. Only when I had a few for sure did I put my camera away. That's a Leafeon. A grass-type evolution to Eevee. I responded finally, and Mama blinked at the response before looking at the snoozing Pokemon. Really? Yeah. Pinery, at the Eevee Evolution Lab, showed me pictures. She's the one I worked with when I went up to MT Moon. I remember. I need to talk to that Pokemon. Hopefully without spooking it. Can you wait here? I asked, looking at Mama seriously, and she just sighed and waved at me. Go on then. I'll watch from here. Thanks, Mama. A Leafeon. If I could get them to lead me to where they evolved, I could bring back proof of the Moss Stone evolution. I was no professor, but seeing more cute Leafeon and Glacian around Kanto would be a reward all on its own. Chapter 118. There was an art to approaching a wild Pokemon. And like all arts, it changed depending on what you wanted. A capture battle? Sneaking was the wrong approach. You wanted to be straightforward, the Pokemon that ran meant it had no interest in a battle, no interest in a trainer. But what if you wanted something else from a Pokemon? Well, then it depended on the Pokemon, and as I approached through the grass trying to be quiet, I ran through all that I knew about Leafeon in my head. One thing stood out to me the most. Leafeon might not actually need to eat normal food. They photosynthesized, hence why this one was out on a rock in the sun. A Pokemon that didn't need to eat berries was probably my weakness, to be honest, as that was my main approach. So what else did this Pokemon want? To be left alone. Well, that wasn't going to work. So I did the only thing left to me. Get close and just be blunt. While I tried to be quiet, so I could get closer, I didn't hunker down, or try to hide. I wanted to look reassuring, and not like I was sneaking up on the Leafeon. Sneaking up on a Pokemon would definitely trigger instincts I didn't want to deal with. So back straight and stepped carefully through the grass. I avoided the Fomantis in the field with practiced ease. Really, you just made sure your shadow didn't fall over them, they didn't care about anything else. And then I was getting close. Leafeon was just resting on the rock, its big cute ears twitched, and I stopped moving, and spread my legs so I didn't look like I was walking towards it. Hello. I called out, just loud enough to reach, but hopefully not startle it, and those big brown eyes opened up. It looked at me still curled up, and I held in my hands some berries, but no pokeball or anything. Hi there. Can I talk to you? I promise I won't dash. It stood up and hopped off the back of the rock. Fuck it. Plan B. Hey, wait. Please. I yelled as I dashed forward. I made it to the rock in time to see the Leafeon stopping for just a moment at the edge of the forest, giving me a look before disappearing into the brush of the forest. Okay, plan C. I muttered and put both berries away while I tapped on one of my pokeballs. Rio? Riolu appeared looking around confused, and I pointed with a finger, snapping how it was meant to be, and giving the order. Sent. I called out, and Riolu nearly jumped to move before she stopped and pouted at me. Come on, Riolu, this isn't the time. I need to find this Pokemon, it's important. Should smell like leaves. Back me up here. I pressed on her, and she looked at me for a moment, sort of judging whether she wanted to comply or not, but eventually, she turned. I could see her nose wiggling. She walked over the rock and started scenting it. Vicky! Mama! I called back as Mama was yelling from the Tauros. I'm going to chase after the Leafeon. It ran off. Alright. Hold on. She yelled, and then climbed off the Tauros. Huh. She sent both Pokemon back down the road, and then started striding across the field without a care. Mama. Careful not to overshadow the Fomantis. Right. She called out, and I relaxed as she did in fact avoid disturbing them, although I noticed they hadn't liked the yelling either. Mama caught up and looked at Riolu with a smile. She's going to track it? Yeah. Good job, Riolu. Mama said, and Riolu perked up at that. And actually looked more invested. That little brat. You want to come? Chasing after a practically unknown Pokemon into the wild jungle of Alola? That's a better time than sitting on a Tauros and waiting. Mama offered, and I noticed she actually looked rather excited for it. Heh. I nodded, and we both looked at Riolu, who jumped off the rock and headed towards where the Leafeon had disappeared. Alright, let's follow. I said, and Mama and I both headed deeper into the lush jungle of Alola. Riolu moved quickly at first, before slowing down, and I very pointedly didn't sigh when I realized she was struggling with following the trail. This couldn't be easy, and I wasn't going to blame her for losing it. Leafeon was famous for smelling like leaves, and we were in a jungle. The math was obvious. Eventually, even she couldn't hide the fact she had fully lost the trail and looked at me with an unhappy face. Rio. Yeah. It's hard. Can you sense its aura? I asked, and Riolu looked awkward for a moment before closing her eyes, seemingly giving it a try. Considering how bad this had gone the last time we tried to use her aura sensing, I wasn't putting much hope in it. But this was so annoying. A Leafeon. If it could lead us to the Moss Stone, I could get proof of its evolution. Finally, Riolu opened her eyes and pointed. Then stomped off into the brush. I gave it a low chance she had found it, but I shrugged and followed. We trundled on, and Mama did slow down a bit as we went, but honestly Riolu wasn't moving very fast, so it wasn't an issue to slow down a bit more so she could keep up. Don't give me that look. It's been more than a decade, and a whole kid since I've stomped through a jungle. Heh. I laughed at Mama's snark. And yet, as we followed Riolu, we passed so many Pokemon. More Trumbeaks in the branches ahead of us. Passimians hollering all over. A small group of Butterfree that noticed us and flew higher to avoid us. I could hear Bounceweed calling in the distance through the forest, their cute little voices adding more ambience. And even angry growls from what I was pretty sure was a pincer. Then Riolu stopped and I met up with her. She was once more sensing, but I could practically feel her frustration. She had lost it, or maybe never had it to start. So I reached out. I could feel her spiraling a bit. Good job, I told her instead, disrupting her focus, as I pulled her into a one-armed hug. This place is so full of Pokemon, I knew it was a long shot. But you tried anyway. Thanks, Riolu. Rio. She grumbled at me. It's okay. We just keep searching around for now. If that's okay? I turned to Mama, and she smirked, even if she was catching her breath. Don't count me out yet, she said, and we both nodded in time. All right. This hunt was still on, just much harder. Let's keep going. Maybe we can find some clues. Keep your nose out, Riolu. Riolu. She agreed and then preened under Mama's proud look. Of course. We continued moving, exploring around, and soon it was less of a hunt, and more just the three of us exploring a cool locale. Oh, what's that? Mama asked, and I looked up. In the branches of a tree above us, a comfey was sleeping, seemingly hooking itself on a branch and just napping away. Comfey. They pick flowers, and then stick them to their body. It actually heals the flowers. They smell really nice. Oh, nice. Mama gushed a bit. I wonder if they can do that with berry tree flowers. I bet they'd help pollinate the trees, if you get some beadrill, or combi. It's hard to get male and female trees properly pollinated sometimes. Mama started going into the idea, and soon I was staring at her, and realized. That's right. Mama is a berry aficionado. As much as I was obsessed with Pokemon, she'd literally gone on her journey just to find all the berries she could and bring them home to start planting new trees. Berry crazy. Mama puffed up a bit and glared at me. I'm not berry crazy. And what does that make you, huh? She demanded, reaching over and running a fist over my head. Ack. Mama. No, Mama, here, only berry crazy woman. Isn't that right? Does this skull have a new berry type, huh? New. I whined as she continued to noogie me while I was trapped. Riolu. Help. Lulu. She giggled at my fate and I knew she was evil. Eventually Mama let me go with a push, and I turned and glared at her, and totally wasn't halfway to crying. Mama just smirked at me, as if she hadn't just tortured me. She was a dark type. Maybe dark grass. Considering her berry craziness, I feel like you're asking for more, Mama said, and I shook my head quickly to deny it. I definitely didn't want more. Lulu. Okay. Enough laughing. Let's keep exploring, I called out, and Mama nodded, nudging me as she walked past with a wink, and I smiled and followed. We continued on, and I kept my eye out for a rock covered in moss, but the jungle was large, and I was exploring it for the first time. We did eventually seem to get a bit lost, and I had to pull out a compass to get us back in the right direction. Eventually we exited the jungle onto the road that ran up Route 6. Well, do we keep going, or head back? Mama asked, pointing down the road, and I shrugged. Probably head back. We can get some ride Pokemon again instead of walking. I could use a meal, she said, and I saw Riolu perk up. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, let's head back. I need to contact Professor Serwell. Professor Kukui first, I guess. But I have these Leafeon pictures which will be valuable on their own. Alright. Let's get walking. This is one of the few times having Arcanine, or your Arcanine around would actually be useful, rather than walking. Don't tell your father I said that. Of course I will. Mama is melting by Arcanine's love. Are you becoming a dog person? Don't even joke. I still pull dog fur out of every load of laundry. Mama growled, and I couldn't help but break out into giggles at that. Not cat fur? Meowth sheds. Pfft. Only on the curtains now. He's been hiding up there to escape the pups. We both laughed at Meow's suffering. Our hike through the jungle switched to a peaceful walk down the side of the road back to the city. Mama and I just chatted away, enjoying each other's company, while we walked. Then we came out from the jungle, to that same field we'd seen the Leafeon in, and as my eyes glanced over at the same rock I went still. That little shit. Mama. I growled out and pointed, and Mama looked over and she went still as well. It was messing with us, Mama said, and I nodded. The Leafeon was back on the same rock, happily napping away. Riolu. Riolulu. Riolu growled. She looked at me and held up a fist. I normally don't agree to battling wild Pokemon for no reason, but this Leafeon is asking for it, I decided, and Mama smirked darkly as she nodded. Go get him, trouble. It's not getting away this time. Come on, Riolu. Rio. I charged across the field, leaping over Fomantis as I did, Riolu right beside me, and as we got close I called it out. Quick attack. Get behind it, so it can't run away. Rio. She called out, glowing white and then blurring forward. The Leafeon jerked up and then noticed us charging and yelped, springing up to its feet, but Riolu was right there as it turned to dash into the forest. And Riolu tackled the Pokemon off the rock. Rio. Lee. It screeched in shock. And as they both rolled around in the grass I caught the glow just before Leafeon exploded in Razor Leaf. Riolu. Make some space, and blast it. I called out, and Riola did, escaping the flurry of Razor Leaf by leaping back and as she fell charging her vacuum wave. Leaf. Leafeon. It screeched at Riolu and exploded in more Razor Leaf, shooting out from its large leaf on its head, but Riolu just thrust her gathered move forward, and the vacuum wave blasted right through the leaves, smashing into Leafeon with a cry. The Leafeon regained its feet, shaking for a moment before squaring up. Ready for battle. Good. It wasn't running. All right, Riolu. Let's do this. Quick attack right past it. Rio. She called out, understanding instantly, and as Leafeon gathered up energy before sending out another flurry of Razor Leaf, Riolu blurred shining white. She juked past the leaves, and then past Leafeon entirely. As Leafeon turned, it came face to face with a vacuum wave already powered up and thrust right into its face. The Leafeon couldn't dodge getting blasted back, rolling across the dirt. It managed to get its feet back under it and shook its head, glaring at Riolu, which is right when my Pokeball that I'd pulled out of my bag and chucked bounced off its head. Lou. It gasped and then disappeared. I held my breath. The Pokeball rocked. Obviously the Leafeon didn't want to be captured. Then again, come on. Come on. I exhaled, and fell to my knees in relief. The third rock and then the Pokeball locked. The Pokemon hadn't been strong enough to break free. Wow. I think that's the first time I ever captured a Pokemon like this. I whispered to myself, and then the Pokeball teleported away. Oh crap. Did that go to the Kahuna, or back to Kanto? I gasped. I needed the Leafeon to guide me to where it evolved. The Kahuna for sure, Mama said, and then dropped a hand onto my head. Good job. That was a good battle. You tricked it into turning its back on you and got a good surprise catch. Well done. I've never captured a Pokemon through battle before. I just kinda threw it. I couldn't help but reveal, and Mama looked down at me. Why? I whined as she started pressing her knuckle into my head again. Sigh is for all the hopes and dreams of a little Haruka that had to struggle for every catch. She growled at me. No. We ended up walking back to the city, and hitting the Pokemon Center, and once inside I approached Nurse Joy. Alola, Nurse Joy. I captured a Pokemon, and the Pokeball teleported away. I know it's supposed to do that, but I'm from Kanto. So where did the Pokeball go? Oh my. She whispered, looking at me. That's not good. You can get in a lot of trouble for capturing Pokemon here. She told me, and I blinked before rubbing at the back of my head. I revealed my Z-ring. I'm allowed, I just don't know where it went. Kahuna Hala said I could. Oh. You're Victoria. How lovely. She seemed to relax from where she had been pulling up a phone receiver, and instead set it mostly back down. We all got the alert that you were considered an Alolan citizen. If you caught a Pokemon. Did the kahuna forget to set up a reserve for any Pokemon you catch? Gore. That man. She grumbled and I laughed as she pulled up the phone and started putting in a number. Kahuna Hala was in trouble. Then almost in parody as Nurse Joy finished dialing, a phone behind us started ringing. I suppose you were reaching out to me then? Olivia offered, walking in and hitting a button on her phone that stopped it from ringing. Kahuna. I was just Nurse Joy started, but Olivia held up a hand. Yeah, I figured, when I had this transfer to my home, I knew I'd have some work to do today. She offered, holding out a Pokeball. It took me a moment to figure out what had happened. Caught a Pokemon? She asked me and I nodded. It's a Leafeon, I said, and Olivia blinked and I could see how her fingers clenched around the ball for a moment. That's... You found one? It was resting on a sunny rock on Route 6 when we were heading up. I've been hearing some rumors of people seeing one recently, but this is the first confirmed case, and you caught it. She mentioned, almost in shock. And now I can find out where it evolved. I need to talk to Professor Kukui as well. Kahuna Olivia. There is something on this island that lets Eevee evolve into Leafeon. I gushed happily, and yet Olivia just frowned a bit. You think it's that simple? I've done work with the Eevee Evolution Lab in Kanto. I have my own hypothesis regarding Leafeon, and now I can prove it. Think about it. Anyone with an Eevee could just come to Akala and evolve their Pokemon. It sounds nice, but I'll need more than hopeful words. Let's call Kukui. I agree, it's worth exploring. She said, and I grinned. Oh, but I already have 6 Pokemon. Do I have to send one somewhere first? How about I handle Leafeon's Pokeball for now, and we can figure that out later? She asked, and I shrugged. Whatever. I only caught the Pokemon because it was quick to run away. But Mama, I noticed, was frowning, and Olivia showed no sign of backing down under Mama's glare. Ugh. Politics, I could practically smell it, but opportunity smelled all the better. Alola. Kukui called out as he walked into the Pokemon Center, and I smiled and waved back at him. Alola. Professor. We'd been waiting as Nurse Joy looked over the Leafeon. But she hadn't returned just yet. Kukui honestly had gotten here really fast. Olivia, good to see you. I came as quick as I could. Vicky. Nice to see you again. I see you're in the middle of this. It was Mrs. Ferrous, right? Nice to see you again. And to you, Professor. Mama offered. Mama had been catty? Yeah, best way to put it ever since Olivia hadn't given me Leafeon's Pokeball, and from her comments since Olivia had arrived, I think I see the issue. Olivia didn't want me to have the Leafeon, as Pinery had mentioned. Even just pictures confirming they existed were a recent thing. I guess it made sense. Who would instantly think that a big rock nearby had anything to do with a Pokemon's evolution? Seriously, some evolutions were super obtuse. Victoria managed to capture a Leafeon. Olivia opened with, and Kukui, who had been walking over, stuttered for a moment. Seriously? Seriously. Olivia replied, and I grinned, throwing a thumbs up. That's amazing. Congratulations. He offered to me, but I just grinned even wider, as I cut in. No, the best part is, I think we can use the Leafeon to find where it evolved. If it can lead us to the location where it evolved, we can find the environmental factor that caused the evolution. More Leafeon. Huh. That idea makes me want to explode. I see why you called me for an emergency. Indeed. Olivia offered. The idea is appealing. Considering the circumstances. I'm requesting that you investigate this. She asked, and Kukui nodded instantly. I'm in. Principal Oak is already covering for my class. Oh, it's still school time. Sorry, Professor. Haha. It happens. Nothing to worry about. Who knows, if we find something good, maybe my next class will be all about a new discovery. It will. I agreed, excited, and me and Kukui both shared wide grins. I loved Kukui, he was the best. Ah, Kahuna. I've completed my examination. Nurse Joy returned with a tray holding the pokeball, and Olivia nodded, reaching out and taking the ball. Thank you, nurse. Kukui, I'm entrusting you with the Pokemon for now. Please explore its origins and see what you can find out. Kahuna, didn't Vicky catch it? Kukui asked, noticing the issue right away. She already has 6 Pokemon with her. Olivia offered, as an excuse, and it definitely was considering the way everyone present looked at her. I need to have a discussion with the Kahuna, but I'd appreciate it if you return to my home once your investigation is completed. Nowhere else, Kukui. Understood. Good. She said firmly, and then she finally looked away from Kukui, and looked at me. For a long moment she didn't move and then she spoke. This capture caught us by surprise, but you should be proud. Let us adults handle any issues that come. I trust Kukui will be responsible for the Pokemon you captured for now. I hope you will trust him as well. I do. Good. Then. I apologize for the awkwardness, this should be a happy moment. I hope you retain that despite everything. I have to go. Kukui. Yes, ma'am. He replied at her firm nod, an order for sure. Then she walked out. Well, that was awkward. She doesn't want to give you a Pokemon you captured, despite the Kahunas saying you could capture Pokemon here. Mama said bluntly what the issue was, and Kukui winced, as Mama glared at him. Yeah, that's what I picked up as well. But in the end I shrugged. It doesn't matter. I didn't capture the Pokemon to join my team. I battle captured it, never did that before. I just couldn't let it run off again. So Professor. Let's see if we can find out where it evolved. That's what's important here. He looked at me, and then broke into that grin of his. That's right. He agreed and still holding the Pokeball looked at it. I guess we need to say Alola. Yeah. Hopefully it wouldn't be a troublemaker. Chapter 119. We walked outside the Pokemon Center, and Kukui waved for us to follow him as we headed even further away to a small park. This is a quiet place we can use. He offered as I looked around the sunny field. I noticed a sleeping Fomantis in the sun as well, so this was definitely a good spot. Alright. So first step. We need to meet Leafeon, and try to get it to help us. I said and Kukui nodded. Mama I noticed stepped away to sit on the benches in the park just watching while Kukui and I both nodded. Come on out. Leafeon. He called out, and the grass type appeared in the field. Instantly its brown eyes glared at me, and I stared right back. Listen. I know this isn't what you wanted. Leafeon. It demanded, smacking its front leg into the grass once, twice, then over and over. Cute. If you had just listened to me. I just want to talk. Do you want to go back to the jungle? I can release you after, if you want. Leaf. It scoffed and turned its back on me. Are you hungry? Want a berry? I offered. My usual go-to was completely ignored and the Leafeon just kept turning its head away from my hovering berry. Ha ha ha. Well, it's a stubborn one, isn't it? How about this, do you want to get stronger? Some fun battles? I'm Kukui, and I know Vicky can teach you lots of strong moves. Leaf. It snarked, still ignoring. Hey, CMOO. I jolted as Leafeon suddenly darted forward, rushing for the jungle. Return. Kukui called out and the Leafeon didn't make it even halfway to the trees before coming back into the Pokeball. Did it just try to run? I gasped and Kukui sighed, but also he was chuckling a bit. That happens sometimes. It's rare though. This one definitely doesn't want to stick around. Grr. If it wants to be released it just needs to answer one question. Release it again. Yeah. Leafeon popped out and back onto the field and it instantly puffed up in irritation. Hey. Just listen. Show me where you evolved. The place you went from being an EV and evolved into a Leafeon. If you do that, I'll release you. I'll break that pokeball into little bits. I offered, and Leafeon looked at me. Then turned its back on me. That little shit wasn't cute at all. Even if its little leaf cowlick was super adorable, and I just wanted to pet it. Asshole. I slumped, and Kukui hummed as he squatted down looking over the Pokemon that was still ignoring me. Seems like a tough one. Not interested in battling, or getting released. He mentioned, and Leafeon just huffed and turned away again. I've never seen an EV this stubborn before. I mentioned, and Kukui chuckled. I have. They can be little terrors if they want to be, trust me. He smiled as if thinking of an old memory before shaking it off. Maybe another Pokemon could explain it better? Oh, good idea. I hit a Pokeball, and Riolu popped out. Rio? She asked, looking around, and then saw Kukui, and she smiled at him. Why smile at him? You little brat. Riolu, can you explain to Leafeon that we'll let them go if they just answer our question? Or they can stay if they want. Lots of people would be happy to have a Leafeon. Rio. She offered, and walked over, standing in front of Leafeon, who proceeded to turn its head to look away. Riolu. Lola Riolu. Riolu? Riolu Rio. Riolu chattered away, and then. Riolu. She repeated as Leafeon continued to look away from her. Riolu leaned in to get into Leafeon's line of sight, and Leafeon shifted, twisting its head to continue to look away and ignore Riolu. Riolu. She barked, looking about ready to start punching Leafeon, so I moved in and quickly pulled her away before she did battle. Riolu, relax, calm down. I called out as I held her back. Huh. She didn't like being ignored. Good to know. Maybe Lucario would be better? Kukui offered, and I just shrugged. But as Kukui released his Pokemon, and it spoke to Leafeon, it continued to ignore everyone. What a little shit. Okay, I just needed something to tempt. I have an idea. Can you watch it? Sure. I ran off, Riolu chasing after me as we headed back into the main street and then across the way to a Malasada vendor. Even if Leafeon didn't need to eat, I bet it still had a favorite flavor. Alola. What can I get you? One of every flavor. I demanded, slapping some poke dollars onto the table. Rio. And one extra spicy one. I added, and Riolu barked happily. Heh. Once the order was done, I made Riolu help carry some while making sure I held the spicy ones. I'd give her one after we got back. Kukui saw what I'd done and instantly understood. Holding back a smile as he nodded, and I approached. Leafeon was still sitting in the same spot, seemingly just enjoying the sunlight and ignoring everything else. Okay. I called out as I spread out the Malasada in a half circle, the last one I swapped with Riolu to give her the spicy one. Yummy treats. Look, Leafeon, yummy stuff. Don't you want one? I tempted, and then Leafeon opened one brown eye, looked at the food arrayed in front of it, and then just huffed and swiped, sending all of the Malasada scattering across the grass. Ugh. I groaned and flopped back on my butt. I had no answer here. Leafeon was a difficult Pokemon, because it didn't really need to eat. Just sit in the sun and be lazy, and if it was angry at being captured, there wasn't much I could do to force the issue. Rio. Riolu barked angrily as she walked over and picked up the Malasada. Riolu. I groaned as she started chowing down on the spilled spicy Malasada, and was gathering up the others to eat as well. Share those. Rio. She denied, clutching them to her chest, which was going to make a mess. Ugh, you got any ideas? I asked Kukui, who just hummed. Time. He decided, and I slumped. I don't want to spend time. Just tell us where you evolved. I groaned, but Leafeon simply responded with a happy little huff noise, as it delighted in my suffering, and then continued to ignore me. Alright, my turn. Mama said suddenly, and I blinked as she walked right up, and before Kukui or I could act, she reached down and picked up Leafeon by the scruff of its neck. Leafeon yelped and squirmed, but Mama brought it right up to her face and glared right into its face in a way it couldn't ignore. Listen here, you overgrown cabbage. This stubborn act is getting old. Get with the program. Her demand was met with dropped jaws from all of us. Riolu even dropped her malasada out of her mouth as Mama hissed out right in Leafeon's face. And then to my astonishment, Leafeon closed its eyes before opening them into the cutest baby doll eyes I'd ever seen. Which was instantly ignored as Mama shook the Leafeon. Don't try that with me. I've raised that troublemaker. There is nothing you have that'll affect me. Leaf. Don't care. Mama ignored its plaintive cry and continued to glare, and finally Leafeon sort of shifted to a continued pleading look. You have two options, you brat. Either work with us, and we'll give you what you want in the end, or keep fighting us, and you'll keep getting something you don't want. So stop being a brat and wasting both of our time. Leaf. Is that a yes? Mama hissed, and Leafeon shivered for a moment. Leafeon. Good. Mama bent down and put the Pokemon back on its legs and then nodded. Arms crossed as she looked down at it. Whoa. Yeah. Rio. Well, Vicky, talk to your Pokemon. Mama demanded, still looking down her nose. Alright. My Pokemon. Sure. I cleared my throat for a moment. Leafeon. I just really need to know where you evolved. If you help me with that, I'll do whatever you want. Release you, train you to be super strong. Or even let you be a lazy Pokemon that lives indoors and gets all the sun you ever want. Just take me to where you evolved. It looked at me, with those big brown eyes, before glancing at Mama and quickly deciding against whatever it was about to do before nodding. Leafin. That was an agreement if I've ever seen one. Good. Then Mama bent down and picked up the grass type as it went a bit stiff as it looked up at Mama fearfully, but instead Mama ran a hand along its head. Good girl. I'll hold you as you guide us. Don't want you thinking you can run off into the jungle, right? Mama said, with a tilted sinister smile that had Leafeon stiffen up again despite just about relaxing before shaking its head. Leafeon leaf. It offered, giving Mama another dose of baby doll eyes, to look extra innocent. Good. Then all I could do was slump to the ground until my forehead hit the earth. I'm a failure as a trainer. I moaned into the earth. Mama had just completely defeated me. Oh, get up. You're just not the type to deal with obstinate Pokemon. Unlike you, I actually had to scrabble in the dirt to capture my Pokemon. I still have some old scratch marks from meows, when I first caught that alley cat. Brats like this are my type of Pokemon. They tend to have more fight in them, so I looked for that sort. You just have to learn how to deal with them. Honestly. I'm impressed. Kukui said, giving Mama an honest respectful nod. I wouldn't have considered going with that angle either. Ah well. She waved off. Mama was a little flattered. Okay. Fine. Enough playing around. I decided, pointing to the sky then right down at Leafeon. Point in the direction of where you were when you evolved. It looked at me for a bit before huffing and pointing back towards the jungle. Alright. We took some ride Tauros back up the road out of town. And all three of us with Pokemon moved north. It didn't take long before we found the same place that we had found Leafeon, and it pointed off the road from there. Makes sense. It probably knew the forest better from within it than from the road. Guess we gotta roll out from here. Kukui said, and Mama sent him a look like she was embarrassed for him. Yep. I confirmed, and once more we left the Tauros to cross the field, and passed by Leafeon's rock, which it looked at with more baby doll eyes. Ah. It liked its rock. No wait, it was a brat. We continued moving deeper into the jungle. Leafeon would point only when Mama prompted her, and soon we were heading quite deep. North, deeper and deeper. A few Pokemon poked their heads out to see what was going on, but Kukui had his Lucario out, and just a glance from Louie sent the Pokemon to quickly ignoring us. Then we finally came to a part of the jungle. It was actually almost dark, the trees were so close together, the foliage was so dense. It had a muffled quietness to it, despite all the chirps and noises of Pokemon in the jungle around us, it all just sounded far away. And then Leafeon called out. Leafeon. It called out and Louis glanced up and pointed down and Leafeon nodded. It was here. Kukui translated and I nodded. I looked around but there was nothing here? It was just a clearing in the jungle. Are you sure? I asked, because I didn't see any big mossy rocks. Leaf. It growled and wiggled a bit. Mama put her down and she moved over and swiped at some leaves on the ground and, okay you are. I apologized, that was signs of a Pokemon battle. Kukui pulled out some sort of tablet of all things and started pushing some buttons before he spoke. I've got the exact coordinates. It was a GPS of some sort. Alright, let's. Just look, no wait. Sorry. I apologized and moved over to Leafeon. You did what I asked. Thank you. Sorry for the surprise battle, and the capture. If you want to leave, I'll break your Pokeball. You're free to go. I looked at Kukui, who had a boyish grin on his face as he looked me over. You know, it's a rare person that would let such a rare Pokemon just disappear into the jungle. I was entrusted with this by the Kahuna, but it seems I lost it. He shrugged and tossed Leafeon's Pokeball over to me. Thanks, Professor. I said and he just kept grinning. Mama, I noticed, looked at the professor and then smirked. Giving him a little nod. Yep. Kukui was awesome like that. Leafeon made a little chirping noise as I popped open the Pokeball, and then smashed it apart, startling the Pokemon. Her ears shot up and twitched a bit in surprise. Alright, you're free to go. I decided, putting the broken Pokeball in my pack. It'd get recycled at a Pokemart. Alright, Cabbage. Thanks for the help. Mama said, and I couldn't help but snort at the name. Leafeon sort of stepped backwards, shifting the grass as she moved, testing. She moved a few steps looking around as if expecting a trick, but I moved away. Okay. Where was the moss rock? It had to be here somewhere. I moved away, starting a circular pattern from where we had dropped off Leafeon. It had to be around here somewhere. You can't just hide a big rock. Well, you totally could. It was a dang rock. It could be underground or grown into a tree for all I know. Game stuff didn't always translate over well. You know, a lot of researchers are going to want to complain to you for releasing such a rare Pokemon. Kukui mentioned having followed after me, as Mama seemed happy to settle into her spot, finding a tree and a comfy bit of grass to take a break in. They can complain all they want. If they want to research a Leafeon, find one themselves. I muttered as I pushed plants and shrubs away to check, only to find loamy ground. Not a big rock here. Keep moving. Moss. Moss. It had to be somewhere. Heh. Know what you're looking for? He asked, and I didn't quite shake my head but kept looking. I'll know it when I find it. Reassuring. I hope you're right. Kahuna Olivia is going to be angry with me, if you aren't. I stopped searching and turned to the man. Thanks, Kukui, really. I appreciate you letting me do that. Hey, it's fine. Not the first time I've been yelled at by the Kahuna. He said with a shrug, and then he was grinning. But let's find whatever we're looking for before we have to head back so I have something to distract them. Heh. Yeah. I stepped around some bushes, careful not to disturb a weedle I noticed glaring at me from beneath a shrub, and then stepped further into the jungle. Each step had to be careful, as twisted roots and soft ground made a trap asking to grab your ankle. But I kept going, circling around. It might take a while, but it had to be here, had to be close. I just needed. It was pure luck. I glanced to my left, as I explored through and saw it right in between a few trees. Rays of sunlight, filtering through the canopy, landing right onto a large boulder. It was absolutely covered at the top by a thick carpet of moss. It looked like a cupcake covered in frosting, it was so thick. The moss must be enjoying those few streams of sunlight and the moisture in the air. It was a jungle after all. Vicky? I shifted and headed through, breaking into another small clearing. I could practically feel it. The grass crawled up to the rock as if growing from it, and yet, there were no trees close to it. It had an area around it in the middle of the jungle that was just perfect. This is it. I said firmly, but I had to be sure. There wasn't a lot of lore about moss rocks, or ice rocks, nothing really about how they worked exactly, but in Legends Arceus, there was a single bit of information that I'd always remembered, because of how cool it was. Just touching the rock had left the protagonist feeling something. I walked over, and pressed my hand to the rock as Kukui followed behind. And as my palm touched the rock, I smiled. It felt not warm, but like the feeling of warmth on your skin under a sunny day. Or light filtering in through a window on a cozy morning. This is it. I repeated, absolutely sure this time. Kukui didn't say anything as I looked at him, just curiously. Mimicking me and touching the rock, and nearly instantly I watched him flinch back, before reaching out again. What is that? It's what lets an Eevee evolve into a Leafeon. Moss rock, apparently. I decided to use the name since it was rather telling. Hopefully it would let the information spread, and more of them could be found. It's definitely something. Louis? Lou. Lucario. He barked as he reached over and touched it as well, flinching back just like Kukui. Lou. Lucario Lou. Yeah, I felt it too. Okay, let's say I think you're right, Vicky. We just have to test it. Know anyone with an EV that would want a Leafeon? He hummed a bit and pulled out his little GPS device. Seemingly getting the coordinates again. I think we should get out of here. I need to get some equipment to examine this, and make some calls. Sure. I agreed, smiling as I looked at the moss rock. Thank you for letting EVs turn into cute Leafeons. Well, besides that one, anyways. I whispered to it, patting the rock for a moment before turning and joining Kukui, who was smiling at me. He'd definitely heard. Okay, are you like planning this? Stealing my Pokemon? Cabbage decided to stick around when you left. I don't think she knew what to do exactly. Mama explained, a bit embarrassed. She was sitting against a tree, and Leafeon was sprawled out in her lap, with a big little grin on her face as Mama was scritching at her belly. Huh. This is an interesting wrinkle. Kukui offered and I groaned. Fine, whatever. I didn't want a stupid Leafeon anyways. Ask her if she wants to stay with you. I can just give you another Pokeball, I grumbled and Mama smirked. How about it, you overripe cabbage? Want to stay with me? Mama asked, and Leafeon stretched up her back legs and batted at Mama's hand. Lee. She practically purred, and Mama just smiled at the response, before looking up at me, and quickly hiding her smile. It's fine. You should be happy. Pokemon thief. I grumbled, and Kukui was fighting back some laughter as he listened on. It'll probably cause even more issues with that kahuna. Mama warned, actually sounding resigned, but I shrugged. Doubt it, we found it after all. I said, and Mama looked up in surprise. Really? Yeah, a big boulder thataways. Thing is just covered in moss, and if you touch it, you can feel something. It's definitely what caused the EV evolution. I'm calling it a moss rock, and no one can stop me, since I discovered it. That's actually true. Kukui replied after a moment. Should call it a Vicky rock then. Mama said with a grin. Bleg, no way. That's cringe. I denied, and Mama just laughed at my response. Lot of researchers like to put their name to things. But I think moss rock sounds perfect. Kukui added, sounding proud. Don't do that. That's my weakness. Thank you. I decided to say, avoiding the way my face was heating up. The most interesting thing is trying to find some way to find more of them. I said, and Kukui, already following along, nodded. That's right. If we can narrow down the energy of the moss rock, we might be able to make a detector. Well, maybe the Ether Foundation could anyways. I'll need to call Luzamin. Not if I'm here. I denied, instantly throwing up my arms in an X. What, who is Luzamin? Vicky? Mama asked, and I just shook my head quickly. Nothing. She's no one. She's the founder of the Ether Foundation. Oh, and she asked Vicky to marry her son, last time I saw them together. Kukui. You traitor. I whispered and he just broke into laughter at my horrified whisper. Wha? Pfft. Ha 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 ha. Mama broke into her own laughter, absolutely belly laughing at the idea. Leafeon startled a bit in her lap at her reaction. Oh. Oh my. I'll have to meet this Lizardman then. See if her son is good enough for my Vicky. Mama. No. I whispered desperately, but her smile. Oh no. She was going to do it. I was never going to live this down. There was only one choice. Escape with my Pokemon and live as a hermit for the rest of my life. Probably beat up some legendaries and become a hidden monster that only appeared in the endgame as a secret final boss. It was the only way. Chapter 120. Thank you for coming. Kukui offered to the researchers. As soon as we got back to the city, Kukui had been making calls, and lots of people had arrived. Ether Foundation researchers, Alolan scientists, the Pokemon Center had been getting more and more crowded as vehicles arrived full of people and equipment. Mama and I just sat back. Cabbage continued to nap in Mama's lap under the sunlight and Meowth was not pleased. She disappeared when we started to head out into the jungle, and had finally reappeared to try and climb into Mama's lap only to find it already taken. She was now on Mama's shoulder glaring down at the utterly content look on the overboiled Cabbage's face. It was a request from the president, besides, this could be a massive discovery. The ether researcher replied, offering Kukui a hand that was promptly shaken in turn. Of course most of the researchers were looking at Leafeon. Cabbage had plenty of pictures taken of her, and one researcher had even asked to use a scanning tool which Mama had shrugged at. All the while everyone was watched over by Kahuna Olivia. She'd been called by Kukui, and the two of them had moved into a corner before anyone else arrived as Kukui filled her in. I wasn't sure what her opinion on everything was, but I also don't care. My part in this was done. Victoria. I looked up as Kukui approached and waved me over. My part in this was supposed to be done. Dang it. What's up, Professor? Meet, Ether Foundation's foremost EV expert. Dr. Kawana. Excellent to meet you. The Ether employee greeted me, reaching out and taking my hand to shake wildly. Truly, I'm excited for this. If what you and Kukui discovered is true, this could be a milestone in our understanding of Pokemon evolution. Nice to meet you, Dr. Kawana. I greeted back as the man shook my hand wildly. Thankfully Kukui coughed, and the doctor let me go. Alright, I think that's everyone, so, how about we get moving? He shouted out over the crowd, and I could see Nurse Joy looking pleased that all these people would get out of her Pokemon Center. Then we were off. Mama, Kukui, and I joined in Kahuna Olivia's car, a Jeep-styled car that had the roof down, and soon we were driving out of the city. Olivia drove mostly in silence, until we finally arrived, and she pulled off to the side of the road, and we all shuffled out, watching the other cars and vans come to a stop behind us. Victoria. Yes? I asked, as Olivia called out to me. I spoke with the other kahuna. There was a lot of conflicting discussion on how we should proceed. A Leafeon, found on Akala. It caused a lot of confusion. Even in me. Kahuna? Kukui told me you released the Leafeon? Yeah. Sorry. Please don't be angry at Kukui. No. No, I'm not. He did the right thing, and sometimes I envy his clarity. The kahuna hadn't come to a real decision. There are arguments both ways about what to do, but I am the kahuna of Akala. The Leafeon is yours, whether this works or not. I hope you don't take my previous hesitation against me. It caught me off guard how uncomfortable it felt, and I don't like that I felt that way. You are Alolan. You carry the will of Alola on your wrist, and I should do better to remember that. Thank you. I see the Leafeon has grown rather attached. Yeah, she didn't really like me, but Mama. Well, laid down the law, and now Cabbage likes Mama. I'll have to capture her again. Cabbage? Heh. Best you do that quickly, before any of the researchers realize she isn't caught. Olivia whispered to me, and I nodded before realizing an issue. It would teleport away. The Pokeball. Ah, then just keep silent about its status for now. Perhaps tell your mother to keep it close. We will handle the capture after we are done here. I will. Good. Come, I'm excited to see this discovery with my own eyes. I've explored every inch of this jungle, or at least thought I had. Yes, Kahuna. Everyone called out and we all trooped out into the jungle. Mama, to my surprise, was enjoying herself, as she kept petting Cabbage and stoking all the researchers' interest in Leafeon. Mama was enjoying being the center of attention. Then we came into the clearing, Kukui easily leading us to the exact right spot, and everyone started examining the moss stone. Weird scientific devices right out of Star Trek were waved around. Pictures were taken, and all the researchers started getting very interested in the weird feeling the moss rock gave off. I settled back along with Mama as everyone did their science work. My part in all this mess was definitely over now, and I could just sit back and. The ether researcher pulled out a Pokeball, and the noise of a released Pokemon made me look up. V. EV. It cried out cutely as it popped out. The pampered Pokemon was definitely more of a house pet, I noticed. Cute though. So how do you think it works? The researcher asked, as he looked from the moss rock to his EV that was just cutely sitting there. Not evolving. That's what I figure we ask the specialist about. Kukui said, his voice cutting through the chatter, and he looked at me. How about it, Vicky? You have any ideas? The researchers I noticed all looked at me, some with skepticism, some with interest. I got up from where I'd been sitting against a tree, and walked over. Well, first, why don't we ask your EV if it wants to evolve into a Leafeon? I said and knelt down in front of the cute as a button Pokemon. Leafeon is just one of the options you have to evolve into. Is it what you want? V? V. EV. It chirped happily and I reached out and patted it on the head. This was a cutie. Alright, then I think it's fairly obvious. I looked up at the researcher. Battle me. I demanded, drawing a Pokeball from my hip and pointing it right at him. Wahey. I don't battle. And neither does VV. V. His Pokemon cried out happily, walking over and rubbing against his leg. What a cutie. She needs to push herself to evolve. I doubt that she needs some battle. Kawana, I think you should try it. Pokemon often gain something from battle. Kukui added, and the doctor looked from Kukui to me hesitating. It's just for fun. I promise I won't hurt EV. Alright. Alright, how about it, VV? Want to battle so you can evolve? I bet you'll be the most handsome Leafeon, won't you? He cooed at his EV, who absolutely sucked in all the attention. I just laughed as I backed up, but before we could even get started, other researchers waved their hands. Hey! No battles around our equipment. Are you crazy? Easy, guys. Vicky is a very skilled battler. How about we adjust everything so we can get scans? Don't you all want to be the first to see a Leafeon evolution and get the readings? Kukui cut in, once again calming things, and everyone started nodding along with that. I just shook my head as I considered. Jangmo would be a good choice, but he also didn't like losing, and he'd have to take it easy on EV. Brave was a choice, but also not a good one. She was too static. Gibble was right out. Riolu might cause trouble. Mimikyu, or Dratini? No, Mimikyu as a ghost type would be too much for EV. Go Dratini! I called out, releasing my happy little guy as he landed in the grass and then looked around. A lot of attention was on him suddenly, and he purred out a happy greeting. Pre. He trilled at everyone, and EV, I noticed, perked up. V. EV. DRA. Teeny teeny. He chittered, and the two Pokemon greeted each other quickly as friends. Heh, they seem to be fast friends. Dr. Kawana muttered, looking pleased, and I nodded, but moved past it. Perfect. That means it'll be more fun when they battle. I decided, and the doctor didn't look very assured. I knelt down. Dratini, EV here needs some battle practice to try and evolve. You want to help? Teeny. He called out happily and whistled happily at the EV, who seemed a little confused. EV, you want to evolve, right? V. Then you need to push yourself a bit, and battle is the best way to do it. How about a friendly battle with Dratini? I promise we'll keep it fun, instead of hurting. The little EV looked a little hesitant at first, but Teeny whistled at him, and he puffed up his fluff and he stamped his little paw. V. Alright, come on doctor, let's get this started. A nice easy match. Nothing serious, I reminded, and he nodded, still nervous, as he backed up and called EV over to him. Dratini was already moving with me and rose up looking ready. Remember, buddy? Easy easy, we're trying to push EV, but not hurt him. He's not a battler. Dratini, he said firmly. Was that a yes? That didn't sound like a yes, that sounded like he just said he knew exactly what to do. Oh. Begin. Kukui called out. Go for a water pulse, low energy Dratini. Tackle EV. VE. The cutie charged straight at us, roaring all the way. DRA. Teeny. My boy called out, and a blast of water and power launched out, and smashed into the ground just in front of EV. He did a yelp, his front legs missing the floor, and then getting thrown into a roll for a moment as the water pressure sent him rolling. EV. Doctor. Stay focused. EV needs you giving orders. Dratini, a little lighter, buddy. I whispered out the side of my mouth, cause that had not been a weak water pulse. EV rose up, shaking itself off, sending some mud flying. VV. It growled and pounded its paw into the mud, before seemingly realizing it was muddy and lifting its paw off the ground before realizing there was nowhere safe. Heh. What a prissy little guy. Teeny. DRA. My boy whistled out, and it was definitely a challenge. Or an insult? Was Dratini playing the heel? V. Evie puffed up and looked outraged, before turning to the doctor that hadn't actually given any more orders. It demanded, and the doctor looked so confused before clearing his throat. Right. EV. Go for another tackle. Just, dodge around this time. Dratini, you know what to do. I said, mostly because I had no idea what plan he had, but I trusted him. Hopefully. And the two clashed. Dratini let EV actually close in this time, seemingly rewarding the dodging, and then just before EV would have tackled, Dratini arced forward and they both smashed into each other. Double tackle? No, I think that was a quick attack. Good job, Dratini. V. It cried a bit as it landed backwards and rolled, but Dratini whistled, and EV pushed itself to its feet. The little guy did have some fire in him, even if he was a pampered little prince. And then they clashed again. EV rushed in for a tackle, darting back and forth, his face fierce, but Dratini had battle experience, and as EV moved in, Dratini darted to the side, letting EV pass right over him. Another water pulse, and EV was slipping and sliding in the new mud as mud and grass splattered all over it. V. He growled and turned, shaking off the mud and glaring. Then EV planted his feet, and I could feel it. A ripple in the air, a shining around his edges. He roared, letting out his frustration, and a moment later it happened. His form glowed from the inside out, until his body rippled. Leaf. Leafeon. He growled, and his leaf glowed as he glared. Leaf. Razor Leaf shot out, as he thrust his head, and Dratini whistled a bit more sharply in surprise and started diving and ducking. They all thankfully missed, and he sighed, slumping in the mud, thankful he hadn't taken a hit. Then it seemed to hit Leafeon as he realized just what happened. Leaf? EV? Dr. Konoha gasped, and Leafeon jerked up. Leaf. It charged over and leapt up into the doctor's arms, and the two had a cute moment of cuddles, the doctor uncaring about the mud covering his Leafeon. Leaf. Cabbage called out as she walked over, seemingly interested, and soon both Leafeon were looking each other over. Cabbage was a bit bigger than Leaf, but also a bit more rough. Her fur was less refined, even with the mud covering the other. Tell me we got that. All of it, shouted the researchers, and even Kahuna Olivia looked excited. Okay. Now, my part in all of this is dash. Congratulations! Shouted the doctor right beside me, throwing an arm over my shoulder. The discoverer of the Leafeon evolution method. He shouted and everyone cheered and clapped. For me? Yeah. That's too much. Embarrassing. And then Leafeon and Cabbage checked each other out, and the researchers all started congratulating me, which was super embarrassing, and I escaped not long after, and Mama and I came back. Wow. Papa whispered as he sat with Mama on the beach chair. He'd been happily checking out Cabbage, who didn't mind the extra attention, while I told Papa about our day. That's quite the adventure. I'm jealous now, my love. Papa said to Mama, and she scoffed. It was a lot of stomping around jungles, but it had its exciting bits. Mama said, winking at me, and I smirked back. Mama now carried Cabbage's Pokeball. Kahuna Olivia herself had handed it to Mama once I captured Cabbage again and straight up said that Cabbage was Mama's Pokemon now. I guess discovering the Moss Rock and proving it had earned the entire Ferrous family some goodwill. I sighed and leaned back. The sun was setting. Sure, it was a fun adventure, but I'd barely gotten any time to explore Akala Island outside the lush jungle, and now the day was already over. At least it was all over, and all the researchers would definitely leave me alone from now on. I looked around, almost like I expected some weird guy in a lab coat to come charging out of the waves demanding something from me. Phew. Safe. Seriously, what a crazy adventure. Papa whispered and I just rubbed my head. It kinda got out of hand. Yeah. I wonder what people back in Kanto will think. Oh shoot. I gasped, realizing that the sense of foreboding had been real. Pinery Professor Seras. I forgot to call him when we got back to the Pokemon Center after bringing Kukui into it. I have to go. I need to make a call to Kanto. I jumped up and started running. Wait, first I needed to call Kukui again, and see if I could get the data and research. Would Alola even share this discovery? I didn't even have Kukui's number. Ugh. I raced off to the Pokemon Center, whatever. I'd make a call and whatever happens happens. Thankfully it was quiet when I entered the call area in the Pokemon Center and I settled into a chair and pulled out the notebook with numbers, dialing in Professor Cerese's lab. I waited for a bit for the call to connect, and then the call connected. Hello, this is Professor Cerese's lab, this is Ren. Oh Vicky. Nice to see you again. Ren. Major discovery. Leafeon. I captured a Leafeon, and we discovered how they evolve. Whoa, that's awesome. Wait, what? Ren had been sitting back in his office chair looking like he was half awake when I spoke, but suddenly the screen jolted as he sat up and I think fell out of his chair. Ren? Are you serious? Yes. I found it. And we got an actual EV evolution into Leafeon, confirming it. That's... Whoa. Hang on, I have to call the professor. And Pinery. Alright, I'll hold. Right. 1 second. Call. He sort of disappeared, and I just laughed as he did. Okay, I didn't have the data, but I could just share what I saw, and talk to Professor Kukui. He'd always been good about sharing what we learned. Not long after Professor Ceres took over half the screen. Vicky. Good to see you, is this true? Yep. Leafeon is with Mama right now, so I can't show her off, but another researcher from the Ether Foundation brought an EV and I helped it evolve as well. Okay, that's... Alright, hang on, I'm going to record this, if that's alright? I nodded, and he continued. Good, so Ren is that Pinery? No? Get her on the line. Thank you. Okay, starting recording, tell me everything. I nodded, took a deep breath and started sharing. I very specifically didn't share that it was on Akala Island though. Just saying in Alola. I was a Kanto girl, but that doesn't mean I was going to betray Alola either. Not that I doubted Alola wouldn't be sharing the location to tourists, but still. As I spoke, Ceres asked questions, pulling data he needed out of me, and soon Pinery's screen popped up, turning the three-way call into a four-way, but I just kept talking after giving her a smile and nod. Okay, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing this with us, Vicky, Seras said when I finally finished. No problem. I did agree to help the EV research lab, you know? Normally, we accept donations or EV. Not a full-on confirmed evolution method. Pinery stressed, and she looked frazzled. Or at least a semi-confirmed one. No offense to you, Vicky, but until we have the data dash. I get it. It's okay. I'll see about that data. I'm not sure where Professor Kukui is at the moment, but I'll check and see if I can get the research data. Or get the Ether Foundation to send it? I'm not sure what the rule is. It gets complicated. Most research labs don't share data unless they're part of the SAMA. Never mind. It's complicated, but if you can, we'd appreciate it. You say this moss rock, you feel something? Yeah, you touch the rock and you can't miss it. It feels alive, almost. Like it gathered so much energy it's just leaking out. Fascinating. If this is true, then, I think Glacian is similar. I finally said, and Pinery looked up at me sharply. You think? It's just a guess, but I think there is probably an ice rock, similar to the moss rock, that does the same thing, but for Glacian. Any reason to suspect this? Seras asked, cutting to the heart of the problem. Only a gut feeling, but I'll keep an eye out. I said, knowing that a gut feeling wasn't going to be taken seriously without evidence. Do that. Pinery demanded, pointing. The Glacian-obsessed researcher was practically face to face with her screen. I will. There might be one here in Alola, and I still haven't explored most of the islands. Alright, well, this is quite a surprise. I'll make some calls to the Ether Foundation contacts I have, but if you can get the data, trust me, it'll be easier. If they won't, then I'll talk to Lizman directly. She did kinda owe me for the TM thing. Plus this was my discovery, so there was no reason it shouldn't spread. Seras nodded and I said my goodbyes. Long-distance calls were expensive after all.